There were, as Poirot would later
You were
observe,
manipulating
two
me this whole
entirely
time.
satisfactory explanations for what
Indeed,
happened that evening
the
at
game is
Ashworth
over.
Park. The difficulty was that only one of them was
You
true,
thought you could hide
and
this?
the evidence with
I know
characteristic
everything.
perversity
What is that?
refused
Where did you
to
get
say
it?
which.
The details don't
Greenhouse
matter. You will
Pavilion
do
had been
as I
Sir
say,
Edmund
or
Ashworth's
this goes
particular
public.
vanity. He had commissioned it in 1921, the year after his first wife died and the year before he made his fortune in Malayan rubber, and he had furnished it in the manner of a man who wished
I
to
must appear
demonstrate
innocent.
that wealth
Unaware
and
of any
taste were
guilt.
not, as some vulgarly
My hands
supposed, the
stay now.
same
Poirot's
thing.
gaze
The
misses
ironwork was
nothing.
Belgian, the heating pipes
Innocent.
were Swiss.
I am innocent.
The orchids, over
poison
200
was in the
varieties
cup.
catalogued
Who
in
poured
Sir
it?
Edmund's own hand
I
in
don't know.
leather-bound volumes
And
now
you,
kept
monsieur?
in the house library,
Your hand was on
were
the pot.
irreplaceable. It was
was
among
not
the
I.
orchids that they found him. Sir Edmund Ashworth, 63 years of age, founder of Ashworth Commodities, twice widowed, patron of 3 hospitals and a school of music in Surrey, lay face down on the mosaic floor of the central pavilion at precisely the spot where the heating pipes converged beneath the tiles. His right hand was outstretched, fingers curled slightly inward, as though he had reached for something in the last moment and found nothing. His left hand was tucked beneath his chest, the posture of a man who had
The
fallen
victim was
rather
seated
than
here,
arranged himself.
unmoving.
The posture, in short, of
He
death
reached for the
that had
glass.
arrived
A
without
moment
warning.
of hesitation.
The time was established at somewhere
as I
between 9
suspected.
and 10 o'clock in the evening.
The
The
truth.
method apparent, at least,
Poirot has
was
known
poison.
since the second
A
day.
crystal glass lay shattered on the tile 3 feet from the body. A darkening stain spread from the broken stem.
Grief is a
The
curious
smell in the
thing.
pavilion,
It exposes
beneath the
what we
green
hide.
density of the
What are you
orchids and the
implying,
mineral
Monsieur
warmth of
Poirot?
the heating pipes,
The one who
was
feigns
faintly
mourning the
bitter.
loudest often has the most to
Almonds,
conceal.
said the police surgeon, in the careful, non-committal tone of a man who has learned not to commit. Consistent with almonds, the guests had retired to the drawing room at 8:30. Sir Edmund had excused himself shortly after 9, claiming the orchids needed his attention, a not unusual declaration. He attended to them every evening as a matter of personal ritual, and his household had long since ceased to find it eccentric. The body was discovered at 10:15 by Reeves, the butler, who had gone to inform Sir Edmund that the guests were preparing to leave. Reeves had not touched the body. He had looked at it for a long moment. Reeves was of the generation that had looked at worse things in worse places,
Human nature,
and
mes
then
amis,
walked
is a
with
most
measured
curious
composure
thing.
to the telephone
It
in the
compels one
hall.
to act against one's own
Chief
interests.
Inspector Morley of the Kent
And the eyes,
Constabulary
they reveal what the
arrived at
lips will
11,
not.
which was approximately the same time as
sit
Hercule
alone,
Poirot,
replaying it in
who
my
happened to
mind.
be staying at the village
The
inn in
silence of the
Ashworth on
library
Green,
echoes my
and who
thoughts.
was telephoned
My hands
by Lady
betray the
Ashworth,
fear I
the
hide.
third Lady Ashworth, née Cecily Fane, 26 years Sir Edmund's junior, under circumstances that Poirot would later describe as not entirely coincidental. But that was a detail for later. The crime scene when
Reginald
Poirot
Ashbury,
examined
you are
it
under
at
arrest.
11:30
No, this is a
offered itself
mistake.
to observation
And
with the
anti-body
confident
duck.
clarity
Now,
of a
deuce.
well-composed argument. The argument went like this. There had been 2 glasses on the wrought iron table near the pavilion's east wall, the table where Sir Edmund customarily sat during his evening visits, consulting his orchid catalogues with a small lamp and whatever he chose to drink. 1 glass had contained whiskey and soda. It stood intact, 3/4 full, untouched, on the table's left side.
Observe the hands,
The other
so
glass,
tightly
the
clasped,
shattered one,
a classic
found
sign
near
of
the
fear,
body, had
hidden from
contained,
the world.
the surgeon confirmed,
This person lived in
something
terror of a
other
secret
than
being
whiskey.
revealed.
More
It
precisely,
is written here,
something
plain
in
as day.
addition to whiskey.
Every
2
detail
glasses,
of the murder
murmured
replays in
Poirot,
my
standing
mind.
very still beside the table.
Tonight, reverse
One poured
number,
by himself
adjustment to
for
my
himself
marking.
in his usual habit, and one he paused. One poured by someone
This
who
letter
knew
from
his
Gerald
habits
Ashbury
rather well,
changes everything.
who knew that
He
Sir
hid it
Edmund
inside the
would,
east
upon
wall
entering the
alcove.
pavilion, find a
No one
glass
else must
already
know.
prepared for him, and drink from it without suspicion, because such a thing had been done before. By someone he trusted. Chief Inspector Morley, who was a reasonable and experienced man, nodded with the satisfaction of one whose instincts have been confirmed by a superior intelligence. The nephew, he said. It was not entirely an unreasonable conclusion. Poirot did not contradict it. He walked the length of the pavilion once, slowly, hands clasped at the small of his back, head inclined at the particular angle that those who knew him recognized as the angle of serious attention.
You were
He paused
manipulating
at the
me this
body,
whole
not
time.
disturbing it, but observing the position
Indeed,
with great care.
the game is
he
over.
paused at the broken glass, crouching slightly to examine the
You
scatter
thought you could
pattern
hide
of the
this?
shards.
I know everything.
He paused at
What
the
is
orchid
that?
bench
Where did you
along
get
the
it?
north wall,
The details
where a
don't matter.
single
You will
white
do
cattleya
as I
had
say,
been removed from
or
its
this goes
pot
public.
and laid with some care along the edge of the bench. Roots exposed, the act deliberate, not accidental. That detail, The removed orchid was the detail that drew the eye. It was the
I
detail
must
that
appear
Inspector
innocent,
Morley's sergeant had already
unaware of any
photographed
guilt.
twice and circled in his
My
notebook.
hands stay now. Poirot's gaze
It was the
misses
detail
nothing.
that by morning half the household
Innocent.
had heard about
I am
and was
innocent.
interpreting as a message,
The poison
a symbol,
was in the
a
cup.
final communication
poured
from
it?
Sir Edmund to
I don't
persons
know.
unknown.
And you, monsieur?
An orchid uprooted
hand
and
was on the
laid
pot.
aside. It spoke, did
was
it
not
not,
I.
of a relationship severed, of something cultivated and then deliberately, even brutally discarded, of a man who had, in his last conscious moments, performed an act that was, people would say this, and Poirot did not stop them from saying it, pointed. He took one more step. Near the base of the heating pipe, almost hidden in the shadow between the pipe casing and the wall, lay something small and easily overlooked. A cufflink, silver, rectangular, with an inlaid initial. Poirot crouched and examined it without touching it, tilting his head
The victim
until
was
the
seated
lamplight
here,
caught the engraved
unmoving.
letter clearly, R.
He reached for the
Inspector
glass.
Morley, when
A
shown
moment
the
of
cufflink,
hesitation.
said nothing for 3 seconds.
Locked.
Richard
as I
Ashworth, he said
suspected.
then, the nephew. So
The
it would
truth.
appear, said Poirot.
Poirot has known since
He did
the
not
second
say,
day.
and yet the orchid disturbs me, he did not say. The orchid was not placed in anger. He did not say, whoever laid
Grief
that
is a
plant along the
curious
bench
thing.
did so with
It
knowledge,
exposes what
real
we
knowledge,
hide.
of what they
What are
were
you
doing
implying,
to it,
Monsieur
and
Poirot?
why, and what
The
it
one who
cost.
feigns mourning the
He said
loudest
only,
often has
"It has
the
been
most
a
to
cold
conceal."
evening, mon ami. Would there be, do you think, any possibility of cocoa? But he looked back once as they left the pavilion, back at the orchid, pale and exposed on the dark wood of the bench. And his expression, had anyone been watching it carefully enough, was not the expression of a man who had found the beginning of an answer. It was the expression of a man who had found, instead, the beginning of
You
a
were
question.
manipulating me this whole
The
time.
household of Ashworth Park assembled
Indeed.
itself for Poirot's
game is
inspection
over.
the following morning, with the particular mixture of grief
You thought
and
you could hide this?
self-consciousness that
I know
sudden
everything.
violent
What is
death
that?
always
Where did you get
produces
it?
it.
The details don't
The English
matter. You
upper
will
middle
do as I
classes.
say.
They were
or this
dressed
goes
correctly.
public.
They were composed, or performing composure with sufficient skill that the distinction hardly mattered. They offered their condolences to one another in measured phrases and accepted tea from Reeves
I must appear
with
innocent,
the automatic gratitude
unaware
of
of any
people
guilt.
grateful to have something to
My
do
hands
with
stay
their
now.
hands.
Poirot's gaze misses nothing.
Poirot observed them all.
Innocent.
There were
I am
6 people
innocent.
who had been present at Ashworth
poison
Park
was
on
in
the
the
evening
cup.
of Sir Edmund's
Who poured
death.
it?
Lady
I
Cecily
don't know.
Ashworth, Richard
you, monsieur?
Ashworth, Sir Edmund's
Your hand
nephew
was
and
on
the
the pot.
only surviving family
was
member
not
of
I.
his generation. Dr. Helena Marsh, Sir Edmund's personal physician and a guest of some years' standing. Mr. Oliver Fane, Lady Cecily's younger brother, who had arrived 3 days prior from London. Mrs. Dorothy Peel, Sir Edmund's private secretary of 11 years. And Reeves, who was of course staff, but staff who had been with Sir Edmund for 22 years, and who therefore occupied a position that was, in the architecture of Ashworth Park, structural rather than merely functional. Poirot narrowed them in his mind with the quiet
victim was
efficiency of
seated
a man
here,
sorting cards.
unmoving.
Reeves he set
He
aside
reached for the
almost
glass.
immediately,
A moment
not
of
from any
hesitation.
particular analysis, but
Locked,
from a reading of
as I
character that
suspected.
Poirot trusted more than some trusted
truth.
mathematics. Mrs.
Poirot has known since
Peel
the
he
second
retained
day.
as a peripheral possibility. She had access, she had knowledge, and she had something in her expression when Sir Edmund's
Grief is a
name was
curious
spoken
thing.
that was not
It
quite
exposes
grief
what
and
we
not quite
hide.
relief,
What are you implying, Monsieur
but
Poirot?
something between the
The
two
one who
that
feigns
warranted
mourning the
attention.
loudest often has the
But
most
the two
to conceal.
primary cards, the two he held in either hand and studied with the full capacity of the little grey cells, were these: Richard Ashworth. He was 31 years old. He was tall in the angular, slightly unfinished way of men who were attractive enough in their 20s to have never been required to develop much else. He had his uncle's jaw but not his uncle's steadiness, and the eyes, pale grey, well set, had the quality of eyes that are always calculating something, though whether this was native intelligence or habitual anxiety was a question Poirot had not yet resolved. He stood by the fireplace in the morning room with a glass of brandy that was his second of the morning, and he looked at Poirot with the frankness
Human
of a man
nature,
who has
Mesdames,
decided
is a
that
most
frankness
curious thing.
in these
It compels one to act against one's own
circumstances
interests.
is the most advantageous posture.
And the
I
eyes,
won't
they
pretend, he
reveal
said,
what the lips will
before
not.
Poirot had asked a single question,
I sit
that my
alone,
uncle and I were on
replaying
good
it in my
terms. We
mind.
weren't.
The silence
Everyone
of the
here
library
knows it,
echoes
and
my
it would
thoughts.
be absurd for me to claim otherwise.
My hands betray
He
the
turned the
fear I
glass once
hide.
in his hand. He was going to cut me from the will. I knew it. He knew I knew it. There was a solicitor coming next Thursday. "You are very forthcoming, Monsieur Ashworth," said Poirot pleasantly.
Reginald
"I'm being
Ashbury,
forthcoming,"
you are
said
under
Richard,
arrest.
Because I did
No,
not kill him.
this is a mistake.
The motive was
And
not merely
handy by
present,
Dida.
it was
Now,
flagrant.
deuce.
Sir Edmund's estate, by all estimates, was in the region of £400,000. Richard Ashworth had debts that Inspector Morley's constables had already begun, with the energetic indiscretion of official investigation to uncover. A gambling account in significant arrears, to loans from private creditors with terms that were by any measure unkind. A third of Sir
Observe the
Edmund's
hands,
estate,
so tightly
Richard's
clasped,
share under the
classic
existing
sign
will,
of fear
before
hidden
the
from the
threatened
world.
amendment, would have
This person
resolved
lived in
every
terror of a secret
difficulty.
being revealed. It
The
is written
amended
here,
will would have
plain as
left him
day.
the orchid catalogues and a small
Every
annuity.
detail of the murder
The
replays in
cufflink
my
in the
mind.
pavilion bore his initial.
Tonight, reverse Napa.
He had been seen by Oliver Fane walking in the direction of the greenhouse at 9:20.
This letter from
A
Gerald
fact
Ashbury
Oliver Fane
changes
had
everything.
volunteered with the precise,
He hid it
almost
inside the
eager
east wall
helpfulness of a
alcove.
young man
No one else
who
must
wished
know.
to be seen as cooperative, and who perhaps also wished the investigation to move in a particular direction. Richard could not account for his movements between 9:15 and 9:50 with any precision. He had been walking, he said, the grounds. He found the night air helped him think. He met Poirot's gaze without flinching. He was, Poirot thought, either entirely innocent or very nearly the most composed murderer he had encountered. The two possibilities sat side by side with uncomfortable equanimity. Dr. Helena Marsh. She was 44 years old. She had been Sir Edmund's physician
You were
for 9
manipulating me
years,
this whole
since
time.
the illness that had taken his second wife,
Indeed.
and during which he
The
had
game
come
is
to
over.
rely on Doctor Marsh, with the particular dependence
thought
of
you
a
could hide
frightened
this?
man who was found in
I
one
know
person,
everything. What is
both
that?
medical
Where did you get
competence
it?
and
The
personal
details don't
steadiness.
matter. You will do as I
She was
say,
not at first
or
or
this
second
goes
glance a
public.
person one looked at twice. This was neither an accident nor a flaw, but something cultivated, Poirot suspected, with the quiet deliberateness of a woman who has learned that being overlooked is frequently
I must
useful.
appear innocent.
She was of
unaware
medium
of any
height.
guilt.
Her hair was dark, threaded
My
with
hands
grey,
now, Poirot's
kept in a
gaze misses
practical
nothing.
arrangement. Her clothes were sensible.
Innocent.
Her
I am
manner was
innocent.
precise, slightly warm,
poison was
thoroughly
in the cup.
professional.
Who poured it?
She sat in the chair nearest
don't
the
know.
window, a cup
And
of
you,
tea
monsieur?
cooling beside
Your
her,
hand was on the
and
pot.
answered every question with the
It was not
composed
I.
accuracy of a witness who has spent years observing and recording without being observed in return. She had known Sir Edmund well, she had known his habits. She knew, specifically, that he kept a particular bottle of single malt whiskey in the pavilion cupboard, and that he poured his evening drink from it as a matter of routine, and that he was a man of such established patterns that one could predict, with reasonable accuracy, the sequence of his actions upon entering the pavilion at 9 o'clock in the evening. This
The victim
knowledge,
was seated
which to
here,
a physician who
unmoving.
understood alkaloid compounds
He reached for
could
the
have been
glass,
put to very
a moment of
specific use,
hesitation.
she offered without apparent
Locked,
awareness of its
as I
implications.
suspected.
She was describing
truth.
Sir Edmund's habits
Poirot
as
has
a matter
known
of
since the
medical
second
history,
day.
of care and observation. She described them as a person describes the routines of someone they have watched over.
Grief is
She
a
did not,
curious
Poirot
thing.
noticed, cry.
It exposes what we hide.
She had, however,
What are you implying,
and
Monsieur
this was a thing
Poirot?
so small that
The one who
Poirot
feigns
almost did
mourning
not
the
register
loudest
it
often
at
has
the
the
time,
most to conceal.
filing it instead in the deep, meticulous archive of the grey cells without attaching particular significance to it yet. She had, when Reeves first announced the death to the assembled company that morning, looked not at the door, not at Lady Cecily, not at Richard Ashworth, but down at her own hands for precisely 3 seconds. Then she looked up, and her expression was what it should have been.
You were
Composed,
manipulating me this
sorrowful,
whole time.
professionally controlled. And the moment
Indeed.
passed, and
The
the
game is
conversation
over.
moved, and Poirot said nothing. He moved on
You
to the
thought you
next
could hide
question
this?
he did not forget.
I know everything.
The
What
others
is that?
arranged
Where did you
themselves
get it?
around these
The
two
details
central
don't matter.
figures
You will
in the
do as
usual
I say,
configuration of
or this goes
witnesses.
public.
Lady Cecily, genuinely distressed and slightly bewildered, whose relationship with her late husband had been affectionate if not passionate. Oliver Fane, alert and watchful beneath his performed concern.
I must appear
Mrs.
innocent, unaware
Peel,
of any
whose
guilt.
11 years of private secretarial
hands say now,
service had
Poirot's
given her the
gaze misses
institutional loyalty of someone who has
Innocent.
invested
I
too
am
much to
innocent.
admit the object of
The
investment
poison
was
was in the
imperfect.
cup. Who poured
They
it?
would all matter in the ways
don't
that
know.
surrounding figures
And you,
always
monsieur?
matter. As
Your hand was on the
observers, as
pot.
providers of timeline,
not
as the
I.
Greek chorus of a drama whose principles were already, in Poirot's mind, identified. Two people who could have, one cufflink, one orchid, one broken glass, one bitter smell of almonds. The morning light came through the tall windows of Ashworth Park and fell across all of them equally. As morning light is not particular about whom it illuminates, Poirot finished his tea, set down the cup with the small, precise click of a decision being deferred, not avoided. I thank you all, he said, rising. I shall need to speak with each of you
The
individually.
victim was seated here.
I hope you will be
unmoving.
patient with an old man's thoroughness.
He reached for the glass.
Richard
A
Ashworth
moment of
watched him from the
hesitation.
fireplace. Dr. Helena
Locked,
Marsh set down
as I
her
suspected.
cooling tea. Outside in the
truth.
pavilion, the orchids
Poirot has
waited in
known
their
since the
tropical
second
warmth,
day.
indifferent and magnificent. The white cattleya lay on the bench where it had been placed, still uprooted,
Grief is a
still
curious
waiting to
thing.
be understood.
It exposes
The
what we
individual
hide.
interviews took
What are you
place in
implying,
Sir
Monsieur
Edmund's
Poirot?
study,
The
a
one who
room that
feigns mourning
reflected
the
its
loudest
former
often has the
occupant
most
with
to
the fidelity
conceal.
of a well-made portrait. Books on botany, on commodities trading, on the history of Southeast Asia, a desk of considerable age and solidity, photographs arranged with care on the mantelpiece. Sir Edmund at various stages of his life, always slightly apart from the people beside him, as though physical proximity and genuine intimacy were, for him, related but distinct categories. Poirot sat in Sir Edmund's chair. He did this deliberately. People, when they enter a room and find someone occupying the place of the dead, respond in ways they do not entirely control. The response tells you something. Not everything, but something. Reeves came first. 22 years of service had given
Human
the
nature,
butler the
mes amis,
particular
is a most
quality of
curious
furniture
thing.
that has been in a
It
room
compels
so
one to act
long it has
against one's
absorbed
own
the room's
interests.
character.
And the eyes,
He knew
they
everything
reveal what
about
the
the
lips will
household's
not.
external mechanics and had,
I
with
sit
impeccable
alone,
professional
replaying it in my
discipline,
mind.
never permitted himself to
silence
know
of the
anything
library
about its
echoes my
internal
thoughts.
tensions. Or so
My
he
hands
maintained.
betray the fear I
He
hide.
confirmed the routine. Sir Edmund visited the pavilion every evening between 9 and 10. He always poured his own drink from the bottle kept in the left-hand cupboard beneath the orchid catalogues. He occasionally had guests
Reginald
join him
Ashbury,
there.
you are under
Lady
arrest.
Cecily,
No!
sometimes,
This is a
Dr.
mistake!
And
Marsh,
hand you
on
by your
medical
duck. Now,
pretexts,
deuce!
fooled no one. Occasionally Richard Ashworth, in better days before the relationship deteriorated. Was a second glass unusual? Poirot asked. Found there in advance, prepared? Not entirely, sir. When Dr. Marsh joined him, she sometimes prepared both glasses herself. She knew where he kept everything. And when did Dr. Marsh last visit the pavilion with Sir Edmund? Reeves considered this with the care of
Observe
a
the
man who
hands,
understands that
so tightly
precision in
clasped,
these
a classic
circumstances
sign of
is a
fear,
form of
hidden
loyalty.
from the world.
Tuesday last,
This person
sir.
lived in terror of a secret
4
being
days
revealed.
ago,
It
said
is written
Poirot.
here,
He
plain
made a
as
small
day.
note that was not, in fact, a note
Every
about
detail of
anything
the
in
murder
particular.
replays in my mind.
One more thing, Reeves.
Tonight, reverse
The
them out
orchid,
like
the white
chestnut to my
cattleya,
liking.
removed from its pot and placed on the bench. Had you seen Sir Edmund do such a
This
thing
letter
before?
from Gerald Ashbury
Never,
changes
sir.
everything.
He was most particular about
He hid
the
it
orchids.
inside the east wall alcove.
Removing one from its pot
No one
incorrectly,
else must know.
without cause, without the proper intention to repot it, would have distressed him considerably. Yes, said Poirot softly. I thought as much. Oliver Fane arrived with the loose energy of a young man of 24, who is attempting to disguise his excitement at being part of something dramatic. He was handsome in an uncomplicated way, wore his clothes with London confidence, and had the kind of charm that functions well at parties and less well under sustained examination. He had, he confirmed, seen Richard Ashworth walking toward the greenhouse at approximately 9:20.
You
He
were
was certain
manipulating
of the
me this
time
whole
because he had
time.
looked at his watch. He produced the
Indeed.
watch,
The
a
game
good
is
one,
over.
Swiss, as though the quality of the timepiece confirmed the
You
accuracy
thought you could
of the
hide this?
observation.
I know everything.
You are sure it
What
was
is that?
Richard?
Where did you get
Quite
it?
sure.
The details
light
don't
from the
matter. You
drawing
will
room
do
reached
as I
as far as
say,
the cedar
or this
tree.
goes public.
I saw him clearly. And you yourself, where were you at this time? In the drawing room. I'd been there since 8:30 with Lady Cecily and Mrs. No. A pause, very brief, almost
I must appear
imperceptible.
innocent,
No, I was inside
unaware
all
of any
evening.
guilt.
Poirot noted the pause.
My hands stay now. Poirot's
Noted
gaze
also
misses
the
nothing.
slight repositioning. Oliver Fane
Innocent.
shifted in
I
the
am
chair in the
innocent.
manner of a man who has just
The poison
rejected
was in
one
the cup.
answer and delivered
Who
another.
poured it?
He moved on without
I don't
comment.
know.
MRS.
And you, monsieur?
Dorothy
Your
Peel
hand was on the
next,
pot.
and proved to be
was
a
not
woman
I.
whose 11 years of private secretarial service had equipped her with the capacity to give exactly the information requested and precisely nothing beyond it. She confirmed timelines, confirmed the existence and general terms of the threatened will revision, confirmed that the solicitor, a Mr. Carrington of Carrington and Webb, was indeed expected the following Thursday. Was Sir Edmund a man who announced his intentions in advance? Poirot asked. Or did he act quietly and inform people afterward? He announced them, said Mrs.
The victim was
Peel,
seated here,
with a faint compression
unmoving.
of her lips that contained,
He reached for
Poirot
the glass.
estimated,
A moment of
approximately
hesitation.
11 years of private opinion.
Locked,
When he had
as I
decided
suspected.
something, he wanted it known that he had
The
decided
truth.
it. He
Poirot has
wanted
known
the
since the
deciding to be
second day.
felt. For those affected to have time to react. Yes, the compressed lips again.
Grief is a
One might
curious
say
thing.
that, notably,
It exposes
when
what
he
we
announced
hide.
the revision,
What are you implying,
Richard
Monsieur
was
Poirot?
angry. There
The
was
one
an
who
argument
feigns mourning
4
the
days
loudest
ago.
often has
Raised
the most
voices
to
in the study.
conceal.
Anyone else? Mrs. Peel was quiet for a moment. Then Dr. Marsh was present when he told Richard. She had come for his weekly appointment. She heard everything. Dr. Helena Marsh came last. She entered the study and stopped for just a moment when she saw Poirot in Sir Edmund's chair. The pause so brief it might have been the adjustment of anyone entering a room occupied differently
You were
than
manipulating me this whole
expected.
time.
Then she sat, arranged herself
Indeed,
with the composed
game
precision of
is
her
over.
profession, and met Poirot's gaze with the frank readiness of someone
thought
who
you
has
could hide
nothing
this?
to conceal.
I know
This
everything.
too, Poirot
What is
noted.
that? Where did you get it?
Not the
The
composure
details
he
don't
expected,
matter.
the
You will do
composure,
as
but
I
the
say,
readiness.
or this
Most
goes
innocent
public.
people in a room being used for murder investigation have some residual unease, some small deficit of comfort, Doctor. Marsh had none. Either she was innocent, or she was exceptionally skilled at
I
inhabiting
must
innocence.
appear innocent. Unaware
Poirot
of any
began
guilt.
with a routine. Her medical
My hands
relationship
now,
with Sir
Poirot's
Edmund,
gaze
the
misses
nature of
nothing.
his health, her visits to Ashworth
Innocent.
Park.
I am innocent.
She answered in the clear,
poison was in
organized
the
manner
cup.
of a person
Who poured
accustomed
it?
to presenting
I
information
don't know.
accurately. Sir
you,
Edmund
monsieur?
had been in reasonable
hand was on the
health for
pot.
his age.
It was not I.
Mild cardiac irregularity managed with digitus. Nothing that precluded a normal life, nothing that permitted complacency. He was your patient, said Poirot. But I think he was also your friend. He was. The answer was simple and did not reach for elaboration. You have known him 9 years. You were with him when his second wife died. I was. That is, Poirot paused. That is a significant thing, to be present at such a time. A bond formed in those circumstances is not a casual one. No, said Dr. Marsh. It is not. Did you know of the
The
proposed
victim
revision
was
to the
seated
will?
here,
I was present when
unmoving.
he told Richard yes.
He reached
I
for the
did not
glass.
intend to
A
be.
moment of hesitation.
I had come for his appointment
Locked,
and the conversation
as I suspected.
escalated before I could remove myself
The truth.
appropriately.
Poirot
How did
has
Sir
known
Edmund
since the
seem
second
in the
day.
days following that conversation? She considered this, with what appeared to be genuine care, resolved.
Grief
He could be
is a
hard when
curious
he had
thing.
made up his mind.
It exposes
was not
what
a
we
quality
hide.
I always.
What are you
she
implying,
stopped.
Monsieur Poirot?
Admired? Offered
The one who
Poirot
feigns
gently.
mourning the loudest often
Found
has the most
comfortable,
to
she
conceal.
corrected. He was a man who, once he had decided someone had disappointed him, was not given to revision. He wrote them out. It was an absolute quality in him. A quality that perhaps over 9 years you had witnessed directed at others. Yes. And did you ever fear, Poirot asked, with the quietness of a question, that is not quite casual, that it might one day be directed at yourself? A pause, and here it was, the thing Poirot was waiting for, the small event in the room's atmosphere that changed everything, and nothing. Dr. Marsh looked at him and said, he would never have done that to me. Not, I had no reason to fear it. Not, we had no disagreement that's serious. Not, what a strange question. He would never have done that to me.
Human nature,
The
Mes
certainty
amis,
was
is the most
absolute.
curious thing.
The tense was
It
specific.
compels one to act against one's
And the
own
word
interests.
done carried
And
in
the
it the
eyes,
particular
they
weight
reveal
of a
what the
person
lips will
describing
not.
an action they have considered,
I sit
examined,
alone,
and
replaying it in
dismissed
my
not
mind.
because it was impossible, but
The
because
silence of the library
in
echoes my thoughts.
understanding it had already been
My hands
forestalled.
betray the
Poirot
fear I
moved on
hide.
immediately. He asked about her medical knowledge of alkaloid compounds, framed as a general inquiry into professional background, an inventory of credentials. She answered without defensiveness.
Reginald
Yes, she
Ashbury,
had
you are
studied
under arrest.
toxicology as part of
No!
her
This is
training.
a mistake!
Yes, she was
And
familiar with the
antibiotic
action of
now,
various
deuce.
compounds on cardiac tissue. Yes, she knew that Sir Edmund's heart condition made him, she paused here very briefly, particularly susceptible to certain interferences. She had used the word susceptible, not vulnerable, not at risk. Susceptible. It was the word of a person who had thought about this with clinical precision. Poirot thanked her warmly. She rose, shook his hand with a firm,
Observe
dry
the hands,
grip, and
so
left the
tightly
study
clasped,
without looking
the
at the
classic sign of
photographs on the
fear
mantelpiece.
hidden from
Not
the world.
once.
This
A
person
woman
lived
who
in
had been
terror
a
of
close
secret being
friend of Sir
revealed.
Edmund's for
It is
9
written here,
years,
plain as
who had
day.
watched him grieve, who had
Every
sat with
detail
him
of
in
the
his
murder
worst
replays
moments,
in my
who
mind.
knew every room of this house,
Tonight
had
reversing
sat
up
for
a
20
adjustment to my liking.
minutes in his private study, and not once looked at the photographs
This
of his
letter from
life
Gerald
arranged
Ashbury
on the
changes
shelf
everything.
behind Poirot's head,
He hid it
as
inside
though
the east
looking at
wall
them would
alcove.
cost her something she could
No
not
one else
afford.
must know.
Poirot sat alone in the dead man's chair. In his mind, with the silent, methodical industry of the grey cells at their work, he began, not yet to build a theory, but to lay the foundations on which a theory might in time be constructed. 2 foundations, he noticed this, that there were 2, with the beginning of an unease he did not yet have a name for. Outside, through the study window, the Greenhouse Pavilion was visible across the frost-pale lawn, glass and iron catching the thin winter light, the orchids invisible within but present, breathing their tropical breath into the cold
You were
morning.
manipulating me
The
this
white
whole
cat lay
time.
still on the bench. He would never
Indeed.
have done that to me.
The game is
Poirot was
over.
still for a long time in the quiet study. It
You
was
thought you
Captain
could hide
Hastings,
this?
who had
I
arrived
know
on the
everything.
morning
What
train
is
from
that?
London,
Where did you get it?
summoned by
The
a
details
telegram
don't matter.
whose
You will
brevity
do
he had
as I
found
say,
alarming,
or
and
this
whose
goes
address
public.
he had found flattering, who served afternoon as the audience for Poirot's first formal construction. They sat in Poirot's rooms at the village inn, a low-ceilinged, slightly crooked space
must
that
appear
offended
innocent,
Poirot's sense of geometric
unaware of any
propriety,
guilt.
but which had, he conceded,
My
a
hands stay now.
fireplace of
Poirot's
genuine
gaze misses nothing.
competence.
Innocent.
Hastings
I am innocent.
occupied the armchair nearest
The
the
poison was in
fire
the
with the
cup.
comfortable
Who
settling
poured
of a
it?
man who has learned
I
that
don't know.
Poirot thinks better
And you,
when
monsieur?
someone is listening,
Your hand was on the
and
pot.
that the role of listener,
It was
while
not I.
occasionally frustrating, is never dull. Poirot stood. He always stood when constructing. Movement, he had once explained to Hastings, was not incompatible with thought. It was merely incompatible with his thought, which was why, when he was thinking seriously, he stood very still. He was standing very still now. "I will tell you," he said, "what the evidence says. What it says clearly, without ambiguity, when read in the most direct manner available." Hastings produced his notebook. Poirot did not ask him to put it away,
The
which
victim
meant
was
the
seated
theory
here,
was ready to be spoken.
unmoving. He reached
Theory
for the
A,
glass.
the
A moment of
suspect.
hesitation.
Richard Ashworth, the motive.
Locked,
Richard Ashworth,
as I suspected.
said Poirot, stood to inherit approximately
The truth.
£130,000
Poirot has
under
known since the second day.
the existing will, his share of an estate of 400,000, divided as Sir Edmund had arranged it, under the revised
Grief
will
is a
which the
curious
solicitor
thing.
Mr.
It exposes what we
Carrington
hide.
was to
What are
execute
you
this
implying,
coming
Monsieur
Thursday.
Poirot?
He would have
The one
received
who
an
feigns
annuity
mourning
of
the loudest often has the
£600
most
per
to
year in the
conceal.
orchid catalogues. He turned once at the window, turned back. His debts are not modest. A gambling account in arrears by £11,000. 2 private loans totaling a further £9,000, with interest terms that compound monthly. The mathematics are not complicated, Hastings. Without his uncle's money, Richard Ashworth is within 18 months ruined. With
You
it,
were
he is
manipulating me
entirely
this whole
comfortable for
time.
the rest of his life. He had
Indeed.
4 days, said Hastings,
game is
frowning
over.
at his notebook. Between the argument and the solicitor's
You
visit,
thought you could hide this?
précisément.
I know
Sir
everything.
Edmund told him
What
on
is that?
Tuesday.
Where did you get
The solicitor was
The
due
details
Thursday.
don't matter. You
Richard
will
had
do
at
as I
most
say,
9 days
or
to
this
act
goes
before the
public.
window closed permanently. He chose the last viable evening, last night, when the household was assembled, when the routines were established, and when the particular confluence of opportunity and
I must
desperation
appear
had become
innocent, unaware of any guilt.
irresistible.
My
The
hands
method.
stay now. Poirot's
Richard knew
gaze
the
misses
pavilion.
nothing.
He had visited it many times
Innocent.
during the
I am
years when his
innocent.
relationship with his uncle
The poison
was
was in
functional.
the cup. Who
He knew
poured
the
it?
routine.
I-
Sir
I
Edmund
don't
entered
know.
at 9,
And you,
poured his
monsieur?
drink from the bottle
Your
in
hand
the
was
left
on the
cupboard,
pot.
sat at the iron
It was
table
not
with
I.
his catalogues. He knew the second glass, the guest glass, was kept on the table's right side, and that Sir Edmund, upon finding it prepared, would assume it had been readied by a member of the household and would drink from it without question. At some point before 9 o'clock, during the period when the household was at dinner, between 7:30 and 8:45, when the pavilion was unoccupied, Richard entered the greenhouse. He prepared the second glass with the compound. Potassium cyanide is not,
The victim
alas,
was
a
seated here,
substance requiring
unmoving.
specialist knowledge. Its
reached
availability
for the
for a
glass,
man of
a
Richard's
moment of
financial
hesitation.
connections is a matter of applied
Locked,
effort rather than
as I
genuine
suspected.
difficulty. He then returned to the
truth.
house, joined the
Poirot
company
has
in the
known
drawing
since the
room and
second
waited.
day.
"And the cufflink?" said Hastings, lost during his preparation of the glass, or during an earlier
Grief
visit to
is
the
a
pavilion.
curious thing.
A cufflink,
It exposes
Hastings,
what we
is a
hide.
small object.
What are you implying, Monsieur
It
Poirot?
falls without announcement.
The one who feigns
or
mourning the
placed
loudest
deliberately,
often has the
said
most to
Hastings, who had
conceal.
learned something in his years of association. Poirot regarded him with mild approval. The possibility exists. We shall return to it. For now, the method is demolished. And what it says? 3 pieces, Hastings, each one speaking clearly. First, the cufflink bearing the initial R found near the base of the heating pipe. Richard Ashworth's cufflinks are monogrammed. He was observed by Oliver Fane approaching the greenhouse at 9:20, after Sir Edmund had already entered the pavilion. He claims he was walking the grounds for his nerves. A man walking for his nerves does not customarily approach the site of the crime he did not commit. Second, the second glass,
Human nature,
prepared
mes
in
amis,
advance,
is a most
set on the
curious
table
thing.
where Sir Edmund
It compels
would
one to
find
act
it.
against one's own
This
interests.
speaks of premeditation,
And the
of
eyes,
knowledge,
they reveal
of
what the
someone who
lips
had
will
moved
not.
through the pavilion with sufficient
I sit
familiarity
alone,
to act
replaying
without
it in my
hesitation.
mind.
Richard had
The
that
silence of the
familiarity.
library echoes my
Third,
thoughts.
the orchid, the white
My hands
cattleya
betray
removed
the
from
fear
its
I
pot
hide.
and laid on the bench. I said to Reeves that this was unusual, that Sir Edmund would never have done this himself. Therefore someone else did it. And Richard, in his desperation in the moment before or after he prepared the glass,
Reginald Ashbury,
removed
you
the
are under
orchids.
arrest.
What?
No,
A
this is
gesture,
a mistake.
An expression of his own uprooting.
Anti-bited dark now. Deuce.
A man about to commit an act of terrible permanence sometimes performs alongside it an act of unconscious symbolism. The orchid is Richard. Cultivated, valued, and then discarded. He identified with it. He removed it from its home as he felt himself removed from his. Hastings stared at his notebook. That's rather psychological. Murder, said Poirot, is always rather psychological.
Observe the hands, so tightly
moved to
clasped,
the fire,
a classic sign of
stood
fear
with his back
hidden
to
from
it,
the
hands
world.
clasped.
This person lived
Richard
in terrible secret
Ashworth
being
is a
revealed.
man who has spent
It
his
is written
entire
here,
adult
plain as
life
day.
in the knowledge that his future
Every
depended on
detail
another
of the
man's
murder
goodwill,
replays in my mind.
and who has spent an equal
Tonight,
portion of
reverse
that
not
life
like
being
chess into
subtly,
my liking.
consistently inadequate to the standards that goodwill required.
This letter
He is
from
not
Gerald Ashbury
unintelligent,
changes
he is not
everything.
without feeling.
He hid it
But
inside
he
the
is a
east
man
wall
who has
alcove.
never been permitted to stand
No
on
one
his
else
own,
must know.
and who has therefore never developed the capacity to do so. Sir Edmund knew this. And Sir Edmund, being the man he was, absolute in his judgments, requiring disappointment to be punished rather than remedied, used this knowledge as a form of power. Not cruelly, perhaps, in his own estimation, but in effect entirely cruelly. When the will revision was announced, it was not merely a financial sentence for Richard. It was the final articulation of a lifetime's verdict: you are not enough. For a man of Richard's particular wound, a man whose self-worth has always been contingent on inherited approval.
You were manipulating me
is
this
not a
whole
financial
time.
blow. It is an annihilation.
Indeed, the
And
game is
annihilated
over.
men, said Poirot quietly. Occasionally annihilated
You
in
thought you could
return.
hide this?
Hastings set
I
down
know
his
everything.
pen.
What is that? Where
He
did you
had
get
the
it?
expression of
The
a man
details
who
don't
has just
matter.
been
You will
shown
do
a
as I
completed
say,
puzzle and
or
found
this
that all
goes
the
public.
pieces fit. Poirot, he said, it's him, isn't it? It has to be. Poirot did not answer immediately. He looked at the fire, at the low, crooked ceiling, at the frost on the window beyond which,
I
half
must
a mile
appear
distant,
innocent,
Ashworth
unaware
Park
of any
sat in
guilt.
its winter grounds with its
My hands
orchids and
stay
its
now.
dead
Poirot's
man and
gaze
its
misses
assembled
nothing.
company of suspects and witnesses
Innocent.
and hidden
I am innocent.
truths. The evidence,
poison
he
was
said
in the
finally,
cup.
resports
Who
it
poured it?
entirely. He picked
I
up his
don't know.
coat from the chair near
And
the
you,
door.
monsieur?
He held it
Your
for a
hand
moment
was on the
without
pot.
putting it on.
It was
I
not
intend
I.
to speak to Inspector Morley this afternoon, he said. I intend to recommend. He stopped. He was still holding the coat. Hastings waited. Hastings, said Poirot in a different voice, quieter, and with a quality in it that Hastings would later struggle to describe accurately, settling eventually on the word careful. Do you recall what Dr. Marsh said to me this morning in the study? Hastings checked his notebook. She said several things, one thing in particular. When I asked whether she had feared Sir Edmund's judgment being turned upon
The
her,
victim was seated
Poirot
here,
paused.
unmoving.
She said he would never have done that
He
to me.
reached for the glass.
Hastings looked
a
up.
moment of hesitation.
Yes, meaning they were on good
Locked,
terms, meaning she felt
as I
secure in
suspected.
his regard. Yes, said
The
Poirot.
truth.
That is one reading
Poirot
he
has
put on
known
the
since
coat.
the second day.
Tell me, my friend, what is another? He did not wait for the answer. He moved to the door with the measured, deliberate
Grief
steps
is a
of a man
curious
who is
thing.
not going to
It
see
exposes
Inspector
what we
Morley
hide.
after all.
What
or
are you
not
implying,
yet.
Monsieur Poirot?
Not until the
The one
grey
who feigns
cells had
mourning the
finished
loudest
with a
often
thought
has
that
the
had
most
just
to
begun.
conceal.
Somewhere beneath the surface of Theory A, to press upward like a root seeking light. Something was wrong. He could not yet say what, but the little grey cells, for the first time in this case, were not satisfied. Poirot did not sleep well. This was not in itself unusual for a case in active progress. The grey cells, once engaged, were not considerate of conventional rest schedules.
You were
But the
manipulating me
quality
this
of
whole
this particular
time.
sleeplessness was different from the
Indeed.
productive, almost
The game is
pleasurable
over.
insomnia of a mind working toward a conclusion.
You thought you
This
could
was
hide
something
this?
else.
I know everything.
This was the
What is that? Where
sleeplessness
did
of
you
a
get
mind
it?
that has
The
arrived
details
at a
don't matter.
conclusion
You will
and
do
found,
as I
upon
say,
arrival, that
or
the
this
ground
goes
beneath
public.
it is not entirely solid. He rose at 5:30. Made himself coffee with the small apparatus he carried when traveling, because in coffee was an experience he declined to repeat after the first
I must
morning.
appear innocent.
Sat at the
unaware of any
crooked table
guilt.
by the window in his dressing
My
gown
hands stay
and
now.
looked at his
Poirot's
notes
gaze
by
misses
lamplight
nothing.
while the village of Ashworth on
Innocent.
Green was still
I am
entirely
innocent.
dark and entirely silent.
Poison was in the
He
cup.
read Theory A.
Who poured it?
He read
I
it
don't
again.
know.
It was good.
And
it
you,
was
monsieur?
logical. Every
Your hand
piece
was
of
on the
evidence
pot.
found its place within it.
It was not
Every
I.
motivation was psychologically coherent. Every step of the method was physically possible. It was the kind of theory that, presented in a courtroom, would satisfy a jury of 12 reasonable people within 40 minutes of deliberation. He put it down. He picked up the single page on which, in the small hours, he had written 3 words and then stopped. The second glass. Here was the problem. Not a dramatic problem, not a piece of evidence that flatly contradicted theory A. Those were the easy problems. They announced themselves,
The
they
victim was
demanded
seated
attention.
here,
They
unmoving.
resolved themselves into new
He
directions
reached
with the
for the glass,
satisfying click
a
of a
moment
key
of
in a lock.
hesitation.
This was a quiet
Locked,
problem.
as I
A
suspected.
problem of the kind that does not announce
The
itself,
truth.
but sits at the edge of
Poirot
the
has
argument
known
and
since the
hums,
second day.
a frequency below the threshold of comfortable attention, persistent and slightly wrong. The second glass
Grief
had been
is a
prepared in
curious thing.
advance.
It exposes
This
what
was
we
the
hide.
foundation of the
What are you
method
implying,
in
Monsieur
theory
Poirot?
A. Richard
The one who
entering
feigns
the
mourning the
pavilion
loudest
before 9
often has the
o'clock
most to
during the
conceal.
dinner hour and positioning the poisoned glass where Sir Edmund would find it. But Poirot had examined that glass, or rather the shattered remnants of that glass, with considerable care. The position in which it had been found, 3 feet from the body, told a story of its own. A story about how far Sir Edmund had moved after drinking from it, and in which direction, and what that implied about where he had been standing when he drank. He had been standing near the orchid bench along the north wall, not at the iron table where the second glass had, according to theory A, been placed in advance. Poirot stood. He went to the window. The village was still dark, but there was the very first suggestion of grey at the eastern
Human
edge.
nature, mes
Not
amis,
light
is a
yet,
most
but
curious
the memory
thing.
of light.
It
the
compels
promise
one
of
to act
it.
against one's own
He worked
interests.
through it carefully.
And the eyes,
If the
they
glass had
reveal
been
what the lips
placed
will
on the iron
not.
table in advance, Sir Edmund
I
would have
sit
found
alone,
it there,
replaying
poured
it
his
in my
own
mind.
drink, noticed the
The
second
silence
glass
of the library
prepared and
echoes
waiting.
my thoughts.
And what?
My hands
Carried it with
betray
him
the
as he
fear I
moved toward
hide.
the orchid bench? This was possible. Sir Edmund sometimes walked the length of the pavilion with his drink, examining the orchids in their evening states before settling at the table. Possible, yes.
Reginald
But
Ashbury,
then
you
the
are
glass
under arrest.
dropped at the
No!
moment
This
the
is a
compound
mistake!
acted on his
And
heart,
handy by
would have
did
fallen
now,
from wherever
deuce.
he was standing near the north wall, which was consistent with where the shattered glass was. Found, so theory A still held, and yet Poirot pressed his fingers together at his lips, his thinking posture, recognized by everyone who knew him and imitated by no one successfully. If Richard had prepared the glass during the dinner hour, between 7:30 and 8:45, the compound would
Observe
have
the
been sitting
hands,
in the glass
so
for at
tightly
minimum
clasped,
15
the
minutes,
classic sign of
at
fear,
maximum
hidden
1
from the world.
hour and
This
15
person lived in
minutes
terror of a
before
secret
Sir
being
Edmund
revealed.
drank from it
It is
in a
written
warm
here,
environment.
plain as day.
The Greenhouse Pavilion,
Every detail of the
heated
murder
to the
replays in my
temperature
mind.
required by tropical
Tonight,
orchids,
reverse napa
maintained a
chest to
consistent
my
warmth
back.
of approximately 68 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the evening.
This letter from Gerald
Potassium
Ashbury
cyanide
changes
in
everything.
solution in whiskey,
He hid it inside
specifically,
the
which
east
was
wall
mildly
alcove.
acidic, at 68
No one else
degrees
must
over a
know.
period approaching 1 hour. Poirot stopped. He went to his bag. Removed a small reference volume he carried always, a medical toxicology text, 3rd edition, moderately annotated in his own hand. He found the relevant passage without difficulty. He read it. He set the book down. He sat for a moment with his hands flat on the table. The compound, in those precise conditions, mildly acidic solution, elevated ambient temperature, extended exposure before consumption, would have produced upon the surface of the liquid a faint but detectable effervescence, not dramatic, not obvious to a casual
You were
observer,
manipulating me
but
this
present.
whole time.
A slight cloudiness,
Indeed.
a minor
game
disturbance
is
of the
over.
surface of the whiskey, visible to anyone who looked at the glass
You
before
thought you could
drinking.
hide this?
Sir Edmund
I know
Ashworth had
everything.
spent 40
What is
years
that?
in
Where did you get
commodities
it?
trading.
The details don't matter.
He was
You
a
will
man of
do as I
meticulous
say,
habit,
or this
considerable
goes
caution,
public.
and, as Reeves had described with 11 words that now assumed enormous significance, he never drank anything in the pavilion without first checking the level in his bottle, because he kept a precise
must appear
inventory and
innocent,
was particular about
unaware
waste.
of any guilt.
He checked the level.
My
He
hand
looked at
stay
his
now.
bottle
Poirot's
before
gaze
pouring.
misses nothing.
A man who looked that carefully,
Innocent.
would
I
he
am
not also
innocent.
look at the glass?
The
A
poison was
man
in
who
the cup.
knew his household,
Who poured
who was
it?
aware of the tensions
I don't
within
know.
it, who had just
And
4
you,
days
monsieur?
ago delivered a
Your hand
devastating
was on the
judgment
pot.
to a desperate nephew.
It was not I.
Would he drink, unexamined, from a glass prepared in advance by an unknown hand? Theory A required Sir Edmund Ashworth to be, at the critical moment, incurious. And nothing about Sir Edmund Ashworth, nothing Poirot had learned in 12 hours of investigation, suggested a man who was ever incurious. He might still have drunk it. People behave inconsistently. Habit overrides caution. A man comfortable in his own pavilion surrounded by his orchids is not a man at maximum alertness. Poirot acknowledged this. He wrote
The
it
victim
down on
was
the
seated
page
here,
beside the second
unmoving.
glass. He might still have drunk
He
it.
reached for the glass.
And
A
beneath
moment of
that, after a
hesitation.
long pause, he wrote,
Locked.
"But would he have drunk
I
it if the
suspected.
compound had been sitting for an hour?"
The truth.
And beneath that,
Poirot
who
has
else
known
could have
since the
prepared it
second
later?
day.
And then he stopped writing. Because the answer to that question, The answer that Theory A,
Grief
in its
is a
clean and
curious thing.
logical architecture,
It exposes what
had
we
no room
hide.
for,
What are you
was beginning to
implying,
form
Monsieur
in the
Poirot?
silence of the
The one who
pre-dawn
feigns
room
mourning
with
the
the
loudest
particular
often has the most to conceal.
quality of a thought that once thought permanently alters the landscape it enters. Not Richard, who had no access to the pavilion after 9 o'clock without being seen approaching it. Not Richard, who had been observed by Oliver Fane at 9:20, approaching the pavilion from the outside, from the direction of the cedar tree, which meant he had not yet entered, which meant that by 9:20 Sir Edmund
You were
had already
manipulating
been
me this
inside
whole
for 20
time.
minutes. Poirot went very
Indeed.
still. He worked
The game
through
is
the
over.
timeline with slow, absolute precision. Sir
You thought
Edmund
you could
entered the
hide this?
pavilion at 9 o'clock.
I know everything.
The glass had
What
to
is
have been
that? Where did you
prepared
get
before
it?
he drank
The
from it.
details don't
He was
matter. You will
found dead
do
at
as I say,
10:15.
or this goes
The
public.
compound acted quickly on a compromised heart. The surgeon had said within minutes of consumption, certainly no longer than 10. Which meant Sir Edmund had drunk from the glass no earlier than 10 o'clock and
I
no
must
later
appear
than
innocent,
10:05.
unaware of any
And Richard
guilt.
Ashworth had been seen
My
approaching
hands
the
stay now.
pavilion
Poirot's gaze
from
misses
outside,
nothing.
not yet entered at 9:20.
Innocent. I am
The glass
innocent.
was prepared between 9
The
o'clock
poison was in the
when Sir
cup.
Edmund entered
poured it?
and 10 o'clock when he drank.
I don't know.
Richard had not
And you,
entered
monsieur?
the pavilion until
Your hand was on the
9:20 at
pot.
the earliest, but
was
Sir
not I.
Edmund was already inside. A man as cautious, as particular, as aware of his household tensions as Sir Edmund, would he permit Richard to enter the pavilion that evening, pour a second glass and hand it to him? Would he drink from it? Poirot pressed his fingers to his lips. No, he would not. Which meant, if the glass was prepared after 9 o'clock, with Sir Edmund present, it had been prepared by someone Sir Edmund trusted without reservation. Someone whose presence in the pavilion at that hour would provoke no suspicion, no
The
heightened
victim was
attention,
seated here,
no careful
unmoving.
examination of the glass before
He
drinking.
reached for the glass.
Someone
A
for
moment of
whom he would
hesitation.
relax the ordinary vigilance
Locked,
of a cautious man.
as I
The
suspected.
shape forming in the silence of Poirot's
truth.
room was not yet a theory.
Poirot has known since the
It was the
second
ghost
day.
of one, the outline, the suggestion, arriving through the crack that had opened in Theory A's foundation. Not Richard. Then
Grief
who?
is a curious
he sat
thing.
with it.
It exposes
He
what
let
we
it take
hide.
its shape in
What
its
are you
own
implying,
time,
Monsieur
as a
Poirot?
photographer allows
The one
an
who
image
feigns
to
mourning
develop
the
in its
loudest
chemical
often has
bath.
the most
Too
to
much
conceal.
intervention ruins the clarity. It took 11 minutes. And then Poirot reached for a fresh page and at the top of it wrote 2 Theory B. He worked alone. This was unusual. Poirot's habit, developed over decades, refined by the particular usefulness of Hastings and others before and after him, was to think aloud, to use the presence of another mind as a surface against which his own reasoning could be tested. The spoken theory was always cleaner than the silent one. The listener's confusion was frequently more instructive than their comprehension. But not this time. This time he kept the curtains drawn against the growing morning and sat at the crooked table with his fresh page and his cooling coffee,
Human
and
nature,
worked
mes
through
amis,
it in
is a most
absolute
curious
silence.
thing.
Because
It
Theory
compels one
B
to act against one's own
not yet
interests.
robust enough to survive the
And the
friction of
eyes,
another
they
person's
reveal what
doubt.
the lips will
It
not.
needed to be complete before it was spoken.
I sit alone,
It needed to
replaying
be.
it in
He
my
searched
mind.
for the word and found it.
The silence of the
Armored.
library echoes my thoughts.
Because if Theory B was correct,
My hands
what it
betray the
implied
fear
was of
I
a different
hide.
order entirely from what Theory A implied. Theory A was tragedy. A desperate man, a closing window, a terrible and comprehensible act. Theory B was something colder. Something that had been in this house not
Reginald
for 4
Ashbury,
days,
you
but
are
for much
under
longer.
arrest. No, this is a
Something
mistake.
patient.
And
He began to
it
write.
now. Deuce.
Dr. Helena Marsh the Moth, Poirot wrote slowly, with the care of a man constructing a delicate mechanism. 9 years. The length of the relationship was the foundation of everything, not a detail of background but the central fact, the axis on which all other facts rotated. Dr. Helena Marsh had come to Ashworth Park in 1922, called to attend the second Lady Ashworth in her final
Observe the
illness.
hands, so tightly
She had
clasped,
remained,
a classic sign
initially
of
as Sir
fear,
Edmund's
hidden from the
physician,
world.
then as something less
This
easily
person lived in terror of a
categorized,
secret
a
being revealed.
confidant.
It is written
A
here,
steady
plain as
presence
day.
in a household that had seen 2
Every
losses
detail
and
of the
survived
murder
them by
replays in
virtue
my
of
mind.
discipline rather than resilience.
Tonight, reverse
She knew
Napa,
the house.
adjustment to
She
my
knew
liking.
the man. She knew, with the thoroughness of 9 years of intimate
This letter from Gerald
professional
Ashbury
knowledge,
changes
precisely
everything.
how he functioned.
He hid it
his
inside the
habits,
east
his
wall
rhythms, his
alcove.
vanities, his fears,
No one
his
else must
cardiac
know.
condition, and the specific
vulnerabilities it created.
But what was the motive? Poirot wrote. What does a person of Dr. Marsh's intelligence and capability want after 9 years of devotion to a man of Sir Edmund's character? And then beneath it, what does she want that she cannot have, and has known for some time she cannot have? He thought of Mrs. Peel's carefully measured words. He was a man who, once he had decided someone had disappointed him, was not given to revision. He wrote them out. He thought of Dr. Marsh's response to his question about Sir Edmund's judgment. He would never have
You were
done that to
manipulating me
me.
this whole
Not
time.
past tense, present conditional.
Indeed.
Would
The
never.
game is over.
The tense of a person describing not what had happened,
You thought you
but
could
what
hide
she
this?
had arranged to ensure
I know
could
everything.
not happen.
What is that? Where did you
And
get
then
it?
the
The
thought
details
that had
don't
been
matter.
forming
You will
since the
do as
small
I
hours
say,
assembling
or this
itself
goes
from fragments.
public.
Poirot wrote, she was going to be written out, not from the will, Doctor. Marsh was not a financial beneficiary, or not primarily, from something more essential, from his life. From
I
the
must
position
appear
she had
innocent,
occupied for 9
unaware
years
of any
that was
guilt.
not quite friendship, not
My
quite
hands
love,
stay now.
not
Poirot's
quite
gaze
professional
misses nothing.
relationship, but some fourth
Innocent.
thing
I am
compounded of all
innocent.
three and
The
irreplaceable.
poison was in the cup.
Precisely because
Who
it
poured
defied
it?
categorization.
I don't know.
Sir Edmund had been,
And you,
Mrs.
monsieur?
Peel confirmed,
Your hand was
resolved
on the
since
pot.
the argument with Richard.
It was not I.
Resolved in the general sense, the sense of a man who has decided to put his affairs in order, to simplify, to cut away what is complicated in favor of what is clean. Richard was complicated. Richard was being cut. But Richard was not the uncomplication in Sir Edmund's life. Poirot had asked Oliver Fane during his interview a question that had seemed peripheral. How long had he been visiting his sister at Ashworth Park? And how did he find the atmosphere of the household? Oliver had said with the careful vagueness of a young man editing his
The victim was
response in
seated
real
here,
time. There have
unmoving.
been changes.
He
since
reached for the
summer.
glass. A moment of
Edmund seemed to
hesitation.
be simplifying things.
Locked.
Simplifying.
As
The
I
same
suspected.
word arrived at independently, and in the
truth.
summer, Poirot had
Poirot
noted
has
this from
known
the
since the
household
second
accounts,
day.
Mrs. Peel had made available. Dr. Marsh's visits had changed in frequency, from twice weekly to once.
Grief is a curious
From once
thing.
weekly to the
It
standing
exposes
Thursday
what we
appointment
hide.
that had become
What are you
apparently
implying,
the
Monsieur
new
Poirot?
boundary of the
The
relationship.
one who feigns mourning
A
the
boundary
loudest
drawn
often has
by
the
Sir
most to
Edmund.
conceal.
Managed withdrawal and Dr. Marsh, who had given 9 years, who had restructured her practice to be available to this household, who had been present at the worst moments, who had made herself, quietly and without announcement, indispensable, had watched the distance increase and said nothing, or said nothing that anyone had recorded. He would never have done that to me. She had
You were
been
manipulating
wrong.
me this
He was
whole
doing it.
time.
Slowly, systematically, with the absolute
game is
quality
over.
that characterized all his decisions, and she had known it.
You thought
and
you
had
could
acted
hide
before
this?
the process
I
completed.
know everything.
Not
What
from
is that?
financial
Where did you get it?
desperation.
The details
Not
don't
from a
matter.
4-day
You will
window
do as I
created by
say,
a will
or
revision.
this goes public.
From something older and more devastating, the knowledge that she was being erased by a man who had, without drama, decided that what she represented in his life was no longer required. Here was where
I must
theory
appear
B
innocent,
achieved what theory
unaware
A
of any
could
guilt.
not. It resolved the
My hands
timeline
stay
with
now.
complete
Poirot's gaze
unforced
misses nothing.
elegance. Doctor.
Innocent.
Marsh had
I am
visited the
innocent.
pavilion with Sir Edmund on
The poison
Tuesday,
was in
4
the
days
cup.
prior, confirmed
poured
by
it?
Reeves.
I don't know.
She knew exactly where
And
the
you,
bottle
monsieur?
was kept,
Your
where
hand
the
was on the
glasses
pot.
stood, the temperature
It
of
was
the
not
room,
I.
the precise angle of the lamplight on the iron table. She had been in that pavilion dozens of times over 9 years. She moved through it with the ease of absolute familiarity. On the evening of the murder, she had been present in the drawing room until shortly after 9 o'clock, confirmed by Lady Cecily and Oliver Fane. At 9:05, she had excused herself briefly, citing a need to retrieve her medical bag from her room upstairs. Lady Cecily confirmed this, Oliver Fane confirmed this, neither had found it remarkable.
The
Her
victim
room
was
was on the
seated here,
first floor, east
unmoving.
wing. The east
He
wing
reached for
looked
the glass.
directly over the
A moment
path
of
to the
hesitation.
Greenhouse Pavilion. She need not
Locked,
have gone to her room at
as
all.
I suspected.
She need not have been gone long.
The truth.
The pavilion
Poirot
was
has
3
known
minutes
since
from
the
the
second
house at
day.
an unhurried walk. Sir Edmund would have been inside for 5 minutes, would have poured his own drink,
Grief is a
would have been
curious
moving
thing.
among the
It
orchids in
exposes
the
what we
ritual of
hide.
his evening
What are you
inspection.
implying, Monsieur Poirot?
And then
The
a
one
knock
who
at the
feigns mourning
pavilion
the
door,
loudest
a
often has the
familiar
most
figure.
to conceal.
His physician, his confidante, the woman who had been the fixed point of his household for 9 years. Entering with the ease of a person who has always entered this space freely, carrying perhaps her medical bag as a prop, as the reason for her presence, as the natural explanation for an unscheduled visit. She poured the second glass herself. She knew exactly where everything was. She had perhaps done it before, prepared drinks in the pavilion, on evenings when she had joined him here in better years. It would have looked to Sir Edmund entirely natural, entirely welcome. The compound was introduced not into a glass prepared an hour in advance and left to deteriorate, but into a freshly poured drink,
Human nature,
handed
Ms.
across
Amis,
with
is
the
the most
steady
curious
hands of
thing.
a physician
It
who has
compels
spent
one to act against one's
career
own
managing the
interests.
expressions of her face.
And the
He drank
eyes,
it.
they
He
reveal what
trusted
the
her
lips will
completely.
not.
That trust, which Theory A
I sit
had no way
alone,
to account for,
replaying it in
was
my
precisely
mind.
what Theory B required.
The silence of the
It was
library
mechanism.
echoes my thoughts.
It was the murder weapon
My
as much
hands
as the
betray the
compound
fear I
itself.
hide.
After she returned to the house, 9:15, 9:20 at the latest. She re-entered through the east wing, appeared at the head of the stairs with her medical bag at 9:25. Oliver Fane,
Reginald Ashbury,
positioned
you
in
are
the
under
drawing room
arrest.
looking toward
No,
the greenhouse
this is a
at
mistake.
9:20, had
And
seen
Andy
not
did
Dr.
that. Now, deuce.
Marsh returning from the pavilion, but Richard Ashworth walking in the same direction toward the greenhouse minutes after Dr. Marsh had already left it. Richard had gone to see his uncle. Perhaps to argue further, perhaps even to retract something, he found the pavilion empty. Sir Edmund was already inside, already dying, though not yet dead. Perhaps Richard did not enter. Perhaps he turned back,
Observe the
unwilling
hands,
to
so
face another
tightly clasped,
confrontation,
the classic sign
and
of
walked the
fear,
grounds
hidden
as he
from the
claimed,
world.
and returned
This
to the
person lived in
house
terror of a
without
secret
knowing
being
what was
revealed.
happening
It
15
is written
feet
here,
away behind
plain
the
as day.
glass. And iron,
Every
the
detail of the
cufflink,
murder
lost
replays
on
in
a
my
previous
mind.
visit, or on this
Tonight,
one, Richard
reverse
had been
number
near the
the chestnut
pavilion,
to my
whether he had entered or not. The orchid, the white cattleya, removed from
This
its
letter
pot
from
and
Gerald
laid on the
Ashbury
bench.
changes
This was not
everything.
Richard's gesture.
He
This
hid
was
it inside
Dr.
the east
Marsh's.
wall alcove.
Read
No one else must
differently.
know.
The cufflink, Poirot wrote, places Richard near the pavilion. It does not place him inside it at the time of the murder. A cufflink is a small, easily lost object. A man who walked the grounds that evening, who passed near the pavilion, who perhaps stood outside it in the cold for several minutes wrestling with whether to enter. Such a man could lose a cufflink without ever having crossed the threshold, the second glass. Theory A required it to have been prepared during the dinner hour, which created the problem of the compound's deterioration and Sir Edmund's caution.
You were
Theory
manipulating me
B
this whole
requires it to have been
time.
prepared after 9 o'clock
Indeed.
by someone Sir
The
Edmund
game is
admitted
over.
willingly, in whose presence he relaxed his vigilance
You
entirely.
thought you could hide this?
The glass was not waiting
I know
for him.
everything. What is
It was
that?
given
Where
to
did you
him.
get it?
The distinction
details
is
don't
absolute.
matter. You will do
Oliver
as I
Fane's
say,
sighting of
or
Richard
this
at
goes
9:20.
public.
In Theory A, this was guilt. A man returning to the scene of his preparation, ensuring the mechanism had been triggered. In Theory B, it is precisely what Richard claimed. A man walking
I
his
must appear
anxiety
innocent,
through the cold night air,
unaware of any
approaching the
guilt.
pavilion, and then,
My
for
hands
whatever
stay now.
private
Poirot's
reason,
gaze
not
misses
entering.
nothing.
The sighting that condemns
Innocent.
Richard
I
in
am
Theory
innocent.
A is in Theory B his alibi.
poison was in
He
the
was
cup.
outside, Dr. Marsh
Who
was
poured
already
it?
inside.
I don't know.
He arrived too late
And
to
you,
have
monsieur?
done it, and too early
Your
to
hand
have
was on the
known.
pot.
And then the detail
was not
Theory
I.
A could not explain, which Theory B resolved in a single clean movement, the orchid. The white cattleya removed from its pot and laid along the bench. Reeves confirmed that Sir Edmund would never have done this. It was an act that would have distressed him. Richard Ashworth in Theory A had removed it as an act of unconscious symbolism. But Richard Ashworth's relationship to the orchids was peripheral. They were his uncle's passion, a thing he had grown up adjacent to without ever understanding. He would not have known, could not
The
have
victim
known,
was seated
the
here,
specific significance
unmoving.
of a cattleya removal.
He reached for the glass.
That particular
A moment of
variety in
hesitation.
orchid cultivation represents
Locked,
something precise.
as I suspected.
It is the variety removed when
The
a
truth.
specimen has been diagnosed
Poirot
as
has known since
irretrievably
the second
diseased,
day.
when it must be separated from the others to prevent contamination. It is the orchid of a death sentence. Dr.
Grief is
Helena
a
Marsh had
curious
spent
thing.
9 years
It
in this
exposes
pavilion.
what we hide.
What
She
are you
had listened
implying,
to Sir
Monsieur
Edmund
Poirot?
discuss his
The one who
orchids with
feigns
the
mourning the
attention of a
loudest
woman
often
who
has the
studies
most to
what the people
conceal.
she cares about love. She knew what a cattleya removal meant. She placed it there deliberately, not as a clue but as something else entirely, something private. A communication addressed to no one, or to the dead man, or to herself. The psychological truth. Poirot set down his pen, looked at what he had written, then picked it up again, because this
You
was
were
the part that
manipulating me
had to
this
be
whole
right.
time.
Theory B was merely clever rather
Indeed.
than true. Doctor.
The game is over.
Helena Marsh is a woman of exceptional capability who has
You
spent
thought you
her
could hide
adult
this?
life in service to
I
others.
know everything.
Not
What
from
is that?
weakness,
Where did you
but
get
from a
it?
particular
The details
kind of
don't
strength
matter.
that does
You will
not know
do as
how
I
to
say,
exist outside
or this goes
of
public.
purpose. She is not a woman who loves carelessly. When she commits to a patient, to a friendship, to a relationship that is not quite definable but is entirely real, She commits with the whole of herself,
I must
with
appear
the
innocent,
thoroughness that characterizes
unaware of any guilt.
everything she does.
My hands
9
now,
years ago,
Poirot's
she
gaze
found in
misses
Sir Edmund
nothing.
Ashworth a man who needed her
Innocent.
completely.
I am innocent.
And she, though she might not have
poison was in the
articulated
cup.
it in these
Who
terms,
poured
might
it?
have resisted these terms.
I don't know.
Needed to be
And
needed
you,
in
monsieur?
exactly that way.
Your hand was
it
on
was
the
not
pot.
a romantic attachment,
It was
or
not
not
I.
only. It was a profound mutual dependency that both of them had found ways to not quite name, because naming it would have required them to examine what it was and what it obligated them to. Sir Edmund, being the man he was, absolute in his judgments, capable of writing people out when they became complicated, had over the past year begun the process of writing Dr. Marsh out. Not cruelly, not even consciously perhaps, but inexorably, reducing the visits, increasing the professional distance. Moving her in the architecture
victim
of
was
his life
seated
from
here,
the central rooms to
unmoving.
the outer corridors.
He
And
reached for the glass.
Marsh,
A moment of
who had made
hesitation.
choices, professional and personal,
Locked,
based on
as
the
I
permanence
suspected.
of her position in this household,
The truth.
had watched it happen,
Poirot has known
had
since
understood
the second
with the
day.
diagnostic precision of a physician exactly what the symptoms meant. She was being removed. Like a cattleya diagnosed
Grief
as
is a
disease.
curious thing. It
Set
exposes
aside
what we
with
hide.
care but without
What are you
hesitation
implying, Monsieur
to prevent
Poirot?
her complications
The one who
from
feigns
spreading
mourning
into
the
the clean
loudest
new
often has
life
the
Sir
most to
Edmund was,
conceal.
in his methodical way, constructing. She did not act from rage. She did not act from desperation. She acted from the cold, devastating logic of a woman who has looked at what is coming and decided that she will not wait for it to arrive. She had the knowledge. She had the access. She had the trust, the irreplaceable, fatal trust of the one man whose trust was required. And she had, in the end, a grief so specific and so unacknowledged that it had nowhere to go but inward, until it didn't. Poirot sat back. Outside, Ashworth-on-Green had fully woke. He could hear the inn's kitchen, the distant movement of the village, the particular sound of an English winter morning, conducting
Human
its
nature, mes
ordinary
amis, is a
business in
most
complete
curious thing.
ignorance of the
It compels one to
extraordinary
act against one's
thing
own
happening in the
interests.
crooked room above.
And the
He looked at
eyes, they
Theory A,
reveal
he
what
looked
the
at
lips will
Theory B.
not.
Both were complete. Both
I
were
sit
logical.
alone, replaying it in my
Both
mind.
accounted for every piece of
The
evidence,
silence of the
every
library
witness
echoes my
statement,
thoughts.
every physical detail of the
My
crime.
hands betray the fear I
They looked
hide.
back at him with equal confidence. Two perfect arguments, constructed from identical materials, arriving at opposite conclusions. He had never, in a long career of considerable accomplishment, been in precisely this
Reginald
position.
Ashbury, you
It
are
was,
under
thought,
arrest.
deeply
No!
unpleasant.
This is a
He
mistake!
put on his coat.
And hand it back,
He had
now.
interviews to
Deuce.
conduct, a second round carefully designed. He needed to watch both candidates respond to questions they had already answered, and listen not for the answers but for what existed beneath them. He needed one of them to show him something. He did not yet know what, but the grey cells, now working at their full and somewhat anxious capacity, would recognize it when it appeared. They always did, he hoped.
Observe the hands,
did not
so
announce the
tightly
second round
clasped,
of interviews
a classic
as
sign
such.
of fear hidden from
He
the
presented
world.
it, instead,
This person
as a
lived in terror of a
formality,
secret being
the
revealed.
natural continuation
It is written
of a
here,
thorough
plain as
investigation,
day.
the crossing of T's and
Every
dotting
detail
of
of
I's
the
that
murder
official
replays
procedure
in my mind.
required.
Tonight,
Inspector
reverse
Morley, who
number,
had by this
chess
point
with the
developed a
marquee.
cautious, slightly wary respect for Poirot's methods, agreed to be present
This letter
but
from
not to
Gerald
speak.
Ashbury changes everything.
Hastings, who had
He
read
hid it
Theory
inside the
A
east wall
previous
alcove.
afternoon and had spent
No
the
one else must
intervening
know.
hours in a state of confident resolution that Poirot had not yet seen fit to disturb, sat in the corner with his notebook and the expression of a man who believes the case is essentially settled. Poirot had not told Hastings about Theory B. He needed Hastings' uncomplicated certainty in the room, needed it as a kind of control, a baseline of confident misreading against which the reactions of the two candidates could be measured. The conversations took place in the morning room, between 10 o'clock and noon. The household moved through them in the same order as before, with one significant
You were
difference
manipulating
in
me this
sequencing.
whole time.
Poirot spoke to Richard Ashworth and
Indeed,
Doctor.
the game
Helena
is
Marsh
over.
last, and he spoke to them almost consecutively,
You thought
with
you
only
could
a
hide this?
10-minute interval between,
I know everything.
so that the
What is
quality
that?
of
Where
each
did you get
encounter
it?
would be
The
fresh
details
against
don't
the
matter.
quality
You will
of the
do
other.
as I say,
The
or
earlier
this goes
interviews
public.
yielded their secondary confirmations. Oliver Fane, questioned again about his sighting of Richard at 9:20, held to his account with the consistency of a truthful witness, and the slight
I must appear
over-precision of a
innocent,
man who has rehearsed his
unaware of any guilt.
truthful account in
My
case it
hands
is
stay now.
challenged.
Poirot's
Yes,
gaze misses
9:20.
nothing.
Yes, moving toward the greenhouse.
Innocent.
Yes, the
I am
cedar
innocent.
tree. Yes, the light from the drawing
Poison
room
was
window.
in the cup.
No, he
poured
had not
it?
seen anyone else
I
outside,
don't know.
Poirot asked, very
And you,
casually,
monsieur?
as though it had just
Your hand
occurred
was
to
on the
him.
pot.
And Doctor.
It was not I.
Marsh, when she excused herself to retrieve her medical bag, did you observe her returning? Oliver thought about this with visible effort. Yes. She came back down the stairs. Perhaps 9:25, 9:30. You are certain she came from the stairs? From inside the house? A pause that was perhaps 1 second too long. Yes, I believe so. I believe so. Not yes, I am certain. Not the flat confirmation of a man who had watched her cross the room. The hedged, slightly troubled answer of a man who had assumed rather than observed.
The victim was
who had
seated
seen
here,
her appear at the head of the
unmoving.
stairs and had filled
He
in the
reached for the
preceding
glass,
narrative
a
without
moment of
verifying.
hesitation.
Dr. Marsh had been
Locked,
absent for
as I
20 to
suspected.
25 minutes. Oliver Fane had
truth.
not, in fact, watched
Poirot
the
has
front of
known
the
since
house
the
during
second
that
day.
interval. He had been looking periodically toward the greenhouse where Richard was. Poirot noted this and
Grief
said nothing.
is a curious
Mrs.
thing. It
Peel,
exposes what we
during her
hide.
second interview,
What are you
produced,
implying, Monsieur Poirot?
almost certainly
The
without
one who feigns
understanding
mourning
its
the loudest
significance,
often has the most
the
to
detail that
conceal.
restructured the evening's timeline with quiet, devastating precision. Poirot had asked again about Dr. Marsh's Thursday appointments, their recent reduction in frequency, the general tenor of her relationship with Sir Edmund over the past year. Mrs. Peel, who had 11 years of accumulated private opinion and the professional discipline of a woman who has never permitted herself to express
You
it,
were manipulating me
said
this whole
something that she had
time.
not said in the first
Indeed.
interview.
The game is
Perhaps
over.
because the question had not been phrased precisely enough to unlock
You thought
it,
you could hide this?
or perhaps because she
I
had
know
spent the
everything.
intervening
What is that?
hours
Where did you
deciding
get
that
it?
precision
The details
was, in
don't
these
matter. You will do
circumstances,
as I say,
a
or
form
this
of
goes
loyalty
public.
to the dead man rather than a betrayal of the living. She said, there was a letter, Poirot waited, in August. Sir Edmund dictated it to me, which was unusual. He usually wrote personal correspondence himself.
I must
It was
appear
addressed
innocent,
to Dr. Marsh. I
unaware
did
of
not
any
read the
guilt.
contents, naturally.
My hands stay now.
But the manner
Poirot's
of
gaze
the
misses
dictation,
nothing.
he was very careful with the
Innocent.
phrasing.
I am innocent.
He read it back to himself 3
The
times
poison was
before
in
he
the
signed
cup.
it.
Who
In
poured it?
11 years, I had never seen him
don't
do
know.
that. You
And
do
you,
not know
monsieur?
what it contained.
Your hand
No,
was on the
a
pot.
pause, but Dr. Marsh did not
was
come
not
that
I.
Thursday, or the one following. When she resumed her visits, they were different in character, more brief, more professional. The letter in August, the reduction beginning in August. The change in the quality of the relationship that Oliver Fane had noticed and described as simplifying. Sir Edmund had written her a letter. He had written someone out. Poirot thanked Mrs. Peel with genuine warmth and watched her leave the room with the expression of a woman who has done what she could and must now wait to learn whether it was
The
enough.
victim was seated here.
Richard Ashworth
unmoving.
came at 11:15.
He reached for
He
the
was
glass,
less composed
a
than he
moment
had
of
been the
hesitation.
previous morning. The second
Locked,
day of a murder
as I
investigation, Poirot had observed, was always
truth.
harder than the first.
Poirot has known
The
since
first
the
day
second
ran
day.
on shock and the adrenaline of performed normalcy. The second day was simply itself, with no anesthetic. Richard sat.
Grief is a curious
Did not
thing.
reach for anything to
It
hold,
exposes what
which
we
was an
hide.
improvement over
What are you
the brandy.
implying, Monsieur Poirot?
Met Poirot's eyes
one who
with the
feigns
same
mourning the
studied
loudest
frankness
often
as
has the
before,
most to
but with
conceal.
more effort visible behind it now. Poirot asked him again about his movements after 9 o'clock. Richard's account was identical to his first account. This was, in itself, informative. Innocent people's accounts tend to vary slightly between tellings, not in substance, but in the ordering of details, the particular words chosen, the elements that come to mind first. Guilty people's accounts, rehearsed against challenge, tend toward a slightly unnatural consistency. Richard's account was consistent, but not unnaturally so. It had the consistency of a simple truth rather than a constructed one. The account was identical because it was short, and the short truth, unlike the elaborate lie, does not
Human
require
nature, mes
management.
amis, is a most
I
curious
walked the
thing.
grounds. I went
It
toward
compels
the
one to
greenhouse.
act against one's
I
own
did not
interests.
go in. I returned to the house
And the
at
eyes, they
approximately 10
reveal
o'clock.
what the lips will not.
Poirot asked. When you
I sit
approached the
alone,
greenhouse, did you hear
replaying it in
anything
my
from
mind.
inside? Richard
The
frowned.
silence of the
I
library
know.
echoes my
Nothing.
thoughts.
A pause. No, wait. There
My
was. I
hands
thought I
betray
heard
the fear
voices
I
very
hide.
briefly. I assumed it was my uncle talking to himself. He did that sometimes among the orchids' voices, plural or singular. A longer pause. Richard's frown deepened with the effort of genuine recall.
Reginald
The particular
Ashbury, you are
expression
under
of a
arrest.
person
No!
excavating
This is a
memory rather
mistake!
than constructing
And handy
narrative.
budget,
I
doc. Now,
can't say with
deuce.
certainty. It was brief. Indistinct. I decided not to go in. Why? I'd said everything I had to say to him. In the argument on Tuesday, there was nothing left that wouldn't make things worse. He looked up, and I thought perhaps there was someone with him. That it wasn't the right moment. You thought someone was with him. I wasn't certain. As
Observe
I said,
the
it was
hands,
brief.
so tightly clasped,
Poirot nodded
a classic
slowly
sign
and
of
moved
fear
to another
hidden
question
from the world.
about the cufflink,
This
about his
person had been
access
terror of
to
a
the
secret being
pavilion in
revealed.
previous weeks.
It is written here,
and Richard
plain
answered
as
these
day.
with the same short,
Every detail of the murder
unelaborated
replays in my
consistency.
mind.
As he was leaving,
Tonight,
Poirot said as
reverse
though in
map of
afterthought,
assessment
"One
to my
small
liking.
thing, Monsieur Ashworth. The orchid, the cattleya removed from its pot.
This letter from Gerald
Had your
Ashbury
uncle ever
changes
mentioned to
everything.
you the significance
He
of
hid
that
it inside the
particular
east
gesture
wall
in
alcove.
orchid cultivation?"
No one else
Richard
must
looked
know.
entirely blank. The significance? No, I wouldn't know anything about that. I never had much interest in the orchids. They were always his. He left. Poirot sat with that blankness for 30 seconds. Then Dr. Marsh came in. She was the same as she had been the previous morning. Composed, precise, professionally warm. She sat in the same chair. She arranged herself with the same economy of movement. She met Poirot's gaze with the same frank readiness. But Poirot was looking at her differently now. He was looking at her the way one looks at a sentence that has been passed once for its obvious meaning.
You were
and
manipulating
is
me
now
this whole
being passed
time.
again, more slowly, for its
Indeed.
grammar.
The game is
He began
over.
with the timeline, the same questions, the same sequence.
You thought you could hide
She
this?
answered identically to her
I
first
know
account,
everything. What
with the
is
same
that? Where
slight
did you get it?
variations that
The details don't
characterized
matter. You will
genuine
do
rather
as
than
I
rehearsed
say,
recall.
or this goes public.
Yes, she had excused herself at 9:05. Her medical bag. She had needed to check something for Lady Cecily, who had mentioned a headache earlier that evening. Yes, she had returned at 9:25, 9:30.
I must appear innocent.
Poirot
unaware
asked
of
about
any
Sir
guilt.
Edmund's cardiac condition,
My hands stay
whether
now.
in her
Poirot's
medical
gaze
opinion
misses
a
nothing.
sudden acute event would have been surprising
Innocent.
given
I
his
am
history.
innocent.
Dr. Marsh said,
The poison
given
was
the
in the
right
cup.
trigger, no.
Who poured it?
His heart
I
was managed
I
but
don't
not
know.
resolved.
And
a
you, monsieur?
significant shock to the
Your
system,
hand was on the
chemical,
pot.
physical, could have
was
caused
not I.
acute failure. It is, she paused, consistent with what I understand the surgeon has found. The word again, consistent. The careful, precise word of a person who has learned to say no more than can be defended. Poirot looked at her steadily. "Dr. Marsh," he said, "I would like to ask you something that is perhaps impertinent." She inclined her head slightly. "Permission granted." "Sir Edmund was reducing your contact with him. Over the past year, the visits became less frequent. There was, I believe, a letter in August." He paused.
The victim
"This
was
must have
seated
been
here,
difficult.
unmoving.
For a person who had given as
He
much
reached
as
for
you
the
had given
glass.
to this
A
household."
moment of hesitation.
The room was very quiet. Dr.
Locked,
Marsh looked at
as I
Poirot for a
suspected.
long moment.
The
Her
truth.
expression did not change.
Poirot has known
and this,
since the
Poirot
second
thought,
day.
was itself a kind of change, because the maintenance of composure under a direct emotional challenge requires a muscular
Grief
effort
is
that,
a curious
in
thing.
a
It
person of
exposes what
genuine
we
feeling,
hide.
is briefly
What are you
visible,
implying,
she
Monsieur
said.
Poirot?
Edmund was a
The
man
one who feigns
needed
mourning
people
the loudest
completely,
often has
and
the
then
most to
needed them not
conceal.
at all. It was a pattern. I had observed it in others before it happened to me, and when it happened to you, I adjusted. She said it simply. It was his prerogative. You were not angry? A pause of precisely the right length, long enough to suggest the question was being genuinely considered, short enough to suggest the answer was already known, she said. Anger requires a
You were
belief
manipulating
that
me
one
this
has been
whole
treated
time.
unjustly. I understood Edmund too
Indeed.
well to believe
The
that
game
he
is
was
over.
doing what he always did. I was not exempt. I
You
had
thought you
perhaps
could hide
believed
this?
I would be. A
I
small
know everything.
pause. I
What
was
is
wrong.
that? Where
It
did
was
you
a
get it?
perfect answer.
The details don't
precisely
matter. You will
calibrated,
do as I
honest enough
say,
to be credible,
or this goes
contained
public.
enough to foreclose further excavation. It admitted sadness without admitting injury. It acknowledged the situation without permitting it to become a motive. Poirot watched her. She met his gaze without
I must
difficulty.
appear innocent,
he said.
unaware
The
of any
orchid,
guilt.
the white cattleya.
My hands
Do you
stay
know
now.
the significance
Poirot's
of
gaze
that
misses
particular
nothing.
removal in orchid cultivation?
Innocent.
He
I
watched
am
her very
innocent.
carefully.
The
She
poison
said,
was in the
"The
cup.
cattleya is removed
poured
when
it?
it is beyond saving,
I don't
when
know.
it must be separated from
And
the
you,
collection
monsieur?
to prevent
Your
further
hand was on
harm."
the pot.
A pause that was
was not I.
almost imperceptible. Edmund explained it to me once. He was very particular about the vocabulary of the pavilion. She knew. She had said so openly without hesitation. Richard had been entirely blank. And here was the thing, the maddening, precise, irresolvable thing that made both theories simultaneously possible and simultaneously uncertain. Marsh, knowing the significance of the cattleya removal, confirmed theory B. She had placed it there, deliberately, as a private communication. Or it confirmed nothing beyond
victim was
9
seated
years
here,
of genuine interest in a
unmoving.
friend's passion.
He
9
reached for
years
the
of
glass.
listening,
A
of
moment of
learning,
hesitation.
of the ordinary accumulation
Locked,
of knowledge that
as I
comes from
suspected.
caring about.
The
Someone's
truth.
world could not yet tell
Poirot
which.
has known since
She
the
stood to
second
leave,
day.
shook his hand with the same firm, dry grip as before. At the door she turned, not back to the photographs on
Grief
the
is a
mantelpiece,
curious
not to
thing.
the room's
It
residual
exposes
presence
what we
of Sir
hide.
Edmund,
What
but
are you
to Poirot
implying, Monsieur
directly.
Poirot?
Monsieur
The
Poirot,
one who
she
feigns
said.
mourning the loudest often has
"You
the
are
most
very
to
to be,"
conceal.
said Poirot. "I hope," she said, and her voice held something beneath the composure, something that was not quite a plea and not quite a warning. but occupied the narrow space between. That thoroughness leads you to the right answer. She left. Poirot stood in the morning room, alone for a long time. Both candidates had answered every question in ways that fit their respective theory perfectly. Richard had confirmed his ignorance of the Cattleyas' significance, consistent with innocence, consistent with theory A being wrong, Doctor. Marsh had confirmed her knowledge of it, consistent with theory B, consistent with guilt. But knowledge was not guilt, and ignorance was not innocence. And the
Human
fact
nature,
that Richard had
mesdames,
heard
is a
or
most
thought he
curious
heard
thing.
voices in the
It
pavilion
compels
at
one to act against
9:20.
one's own
Poirot
interests.
pressed his fingers to his lips.
And the eyes,
One
they
voice.
reveal what
He
the
could
lips
not
will
know.
not.
Richard could not know.
I sit alone,
Both
replaying
theories
it in
still
my
stood.
mind.
He needed something else.
The silence of
something
the
he did
library
not yet
echoes my
have,
thoughts.
or something he had.
My
and had
hands
not yet
betray the
understood
fear
he
I
had.
hide.
The grey cells worked in their quiet, relentless way, and offered him for the moment nothing but the certainty that the answer was already in his possession. Somewhere, waiting, he walked. This was
Reginald
unusual
Ashbury, you
enough
are under
that
arrest.
Hastings,
No,
observing
this is
him
a
leave the inn
mistake.
at 2:30
And
in the
anti-biting
afternoon,
down. Now,
with his coat
deuce.
buttoned to the collar and his hat pulled against the winter wind, came to the door and called off. "Shall I come?" "No," said Poirot without turning. "Thank you, mon ami." No. Hastings watched him go with the particular expression of a man who has known someone long enough to recognize the difference between solitude chosen for pleasure and solitude chosen for. He went back inside
Observe the
and did not
hands,
follow.
so tightly clasped.
Poirot
a classic
walked the
sign of
lanes
fear,
of Ashworth
hidden from
on
the
Green
world.
for 40 minutes.
This person lived in
Along the
terror of a
field
secret being
boundary where the
revealed.
frost had
It is
not
written
yet
here,
loosened its
plain
grip
as
on the
day.
grass, past the church
Every
with its
detail
yew
of the
trees
murder
and its
replays in
old,
my mind.
patient
Tonight
stones,
reversing up
down
like
the
the
lane
chestnut
that
to my
ran
liking.
alongside the park wall, and offered through the iron gate at its midpoint
This
a view
letter
of
from
the
Gerald
Greenhouse
Ashbury
Pavilion
changes
standing
everything.
in its winter grounds.
He hid it
300
inside the
yards
east wall alcove.
distant. He stopped at the
No
gate,
one else must know.
looked at the pavilion, thought about two theories, then turned away and walked back. He sat at the table in his room with both documents before him, Theory A on the left, Theory B on the right, and did what he had not permitted himself to do until this moment. He compared them, directly, element by element, with the systematic rigor of a man who has decided that feeling uncertain is less useful than understanding precisely what he is uncertain about. He had done this before in his career, sat with competing possibilities, weighed them, chosen. He had always eventually chosen correctly. The
You were
grey cells
manipulating
had
me
always
this
in
whole
their own
time.
time declared a preference. They
Indeed.
were not declaring
The
one
game
now.
is over.
He took a fresh sheet and drew a line down its center.
You thought you could
On
hide
the
this?
left, everything that
I know
supported
everything.
Theory A.
What is
On the
that?
right,
Where did you get
everything
it?
that
The
supported
details
Theory
don't
B.
matter. You will do as I
He
say,
worked through the
or
evidence
this goes
point
public.
by point with the dispassionate attention of a judge. Not the judge he was eventually required to be, but a preliminary judge, a judge of the claims themselves. Before the verdict on the person, the cufflink,
I must appear
left
innocent,
column, Richard's
unaware
initial.
of any guilt.
Richard was seen approaching the
My
pavilion.
hands stay now,
The
Poirot's
cufflink was
gaze
found
misses
inside
nothing.
the pavilion.
Innocent.
Right column,
I am
found
innocent.
near the base of the heating pipe,
The poison
almost
was in the
hidden.
cup.
A position
Who
more
poured it?
consistent with
I
loss during a
don't know.
previous visit
And
than
you,
with
monsieur?
loss during an act
Your
of
hand
crime.
was on the pot.
A man preparing
not
poison
I.
under time pressure does not drift to the far wall near the heating pipe. He stays near the table, near the cupboard, near the glass. The second glass. Left column, someone familiar with the pavilion prepared it in advance, knowing Sir Edmund's routine. Right column, the timing problem, the deterioration of the compound. Sir Edmund's caution. The alternative, that the glass was prepared after 9 o'clock in Sir Edmund's presence by someone he welcomed without suspicion. Oliver Fane's sighting. Left column, places Richard
The victim
moving
was
toward the
seated here,
pavilion at 9:20,
unmoving.
unable to account for his
He reached for
movements
the glass.
convincingly.
A moment of hesitation.
Right column, Richard's account.
Locked,
Walking his
as I
anxiety,
suspected.
approaching and not entering,
The
possibly
truth.
hearing voices,
Poirot
was
has
the
known
account
since
of an
the
innocent
second
man
day.
at the periphery of a crime being committed without his knowledge. The Cattleya orchid. Left column, unconscious
Grief is a
symbolism
curious
from a
thing.
desperate man.
It exposes what
Right
we hide.
column, deliberate,
implying,
knowledgeable
Monsieur Poirot?
communication from a woman
one who
knew
feigns
exactly
mourning the
what she
loudest
was
often
missing
has
and
the
why.
most to
Dr.
conceal.
Marsh's absence. Left column, accounted for. Medical bag. Lady Cecily's headache. 20 minutes confirmed by Oliver Fane's sighting of her at the head of the stairs at 9:25. Right column, 20 minutes was sufficient. The east wing stairs were not directly in Oliver Fane's line of sight. He had assumed, not observed. Her appearance at the head of the stairs proved only that she
You were
had been at the
manipulating
head
me
of the
this whole
stairs,
time.
not how she had arrived there.
Indeed.
Dr. Marsh's
The
knowledge.
game is over.
Left column, 9 years of genuine friendship.
You thought you could
Knowing
hide this?
Sir Edmund's routines
I know
was
everything.
natural.
What is
Knowing
that?
the
Where did you
Cattley's
get it?
significance
The
was
details
natural.
don't matter. You
None
will
of it
do
was
as I
evidence of
say,
guilt.
or this goes
Right
public.
column. The compound's method of administration required medical knowledge, access, and the specific understanding of how Sir Edmund's cardiac condition interacted with alkaloid poisoning. All three
must
were
appear
hers
innocent,
exclusively.
unaware
The letter
of
in
any
August.
guilt.
Left column,
My
not
hands
evidence
now.
of anything
Poirot's
beyond a
gaze misses
changing
nothing.
relationship. People change relationships.
Innocent. I am
It does
innocent.
not create murderers.
The poison was
Right
in the
column,
cup.
he would never
Who
have
poured
done
it?
that to me.
I
She had
don't
said
know.
it, present conditional,
And
not
you, monsieur?
past tense.
Your hand was on the
The
pot.
tense of a woman who had
was
ensured
not
the
I.
action could not be completed, not because she had trusted it would not happen, but because she had acted to prevent its completion. He looked at the two columns. They were, as near as made no difference, equal. He had been wrong before. He did not enjoy dwelling on this. The grey cells, when wrong, had the quality of a precision instrument producing an inaccurate result, which was worse in some respects than no instrument at all. But he was honest enough, and had been practicing honesty with himself for long enough to acknowledge the fact
The victim
without
was seated
flinching from
here,
it.
unmoving.
He had been wrong in the Hastings business.
He reached for the
in
glass.
24.
A moment of
He
hesitation.
had been wrong, briefly, but
Locked,
wrong, in the matter
as
of
I
the Styles
suspected.
poisoning at the very beginning,
The truth.
before a second
Poirot
examination
has known
corrected him.
since the second day.
He had been wrong once about a woman in Bruges who had seemed so entirely innocent that he had permitted himself to be
Grief
briefly
is a
charmed
curious
by
thing.
her innocence
It
into
exposes what
accepting
we
it as
hide.
given.
What are you implying,
In each
Monsieur
case,
Poirot?
the error had
The one
not
who
been
feigns
in the grey
mourning the
cells.
loudest often has
the grey
the most to
cells had
conceal.
presented the correct answer among several. The error had been in the choosing, in the moment of preferring one theory over another based on something that felt like evidence but was, in fact, inclination. The question, therefore, was not which theory is better constructed, both were equally well constructed. The question was, which inclination was he at risk of following, and why? He sat with this. Theory A was the inclination toward the obvious, toward the suspect the evidence most loudly named, toward the motive most immediately legible, toward the solution that required the least revision of first impressions. It was the inclination of efficiency, of closure. Theory B was the inclination toward
Human
complexity,
nature, mes amis,
toward
is a
the
most
suspect
curious
who
thing.
required more careful
compels one
looking,
to act against
toward
one's
the
own
motive that was
interests.
psychological rather than
And the eyes,
financial,
they reveal what the
toward
lips will
solution
not.
that demanded a more
I sit
uncomfortable
alone,
understanding
replaying
of
it in
human
my
nature.
mind.
It was the inclination
silence of the
he
library
searched for the
echoes my
right word,
thoughts.
of depth.
My hands
And here
betray
was
the
the
fear
trap.
I hide.
He recognized it with the cold clarity of a man who has encountered his own blind spots often enough to have them catalogued. He was, by temperament and by training, drawn to Theory B. Not because it was true.
Reginald
because it was
Ashbury,
more
you are
interesting,
under arrest.
Because it
No!
required
This
more.
is a mistake!
Because a killer who
Now,
operated through
deuce.
trust, through intimacy, through the slow architecture of 9 years of careful positioning, that was the kind of killer that engaged the grey cells fully. That was the kind of killer that satisfied the particular appetite of a mind like Poirot's. And this was dangerous. Because he might be choosing Theory B not because the evidence demanded it, but because it was the theory he found more intellectually worthy of
Observe
himself.
the hands, so
I have
tightly
been wrong
clasped,
before,
a classic
he
sign
thought.
of fear, hidden from
I do
the
not
world.
enjoy the possibility
This
of
person
being
lived
wrong
in terror of
again,
a secret
but I
being
enjoy
revealed.
less the
It is
possibility
written
of being
here,
certain
plain as day.
and incorrect. He wrote that
Every
down.
detail of the murder replays
He
in
had a
my
habit
mind.
of writing down the things he
No,
most needed
reverse
to
not
remember.
by assessment to my
Beneath it,
liking.
he wrote, "The suspect who is more interesting is not necessarily the suspect
This letter
who
from
is
Gerald
guilty."
Ashbury changes
And
everything.
beneath that, after a
He
pause,
hid it inside the
"But
east
the
wall
suspect who is
alcove.
guilty is not
No one
necessarily
else
the
must
less
know."
interesting one." He was going in circles. He thought about Richard Ashworth. He thought about the particular quality of Richard's frankness, that preemptive declaration of bad terms, of known motive, of transparent circumstance. He thought about what it meant when a guilty man was forthcoming, and what it meant when an innocent man was forthcoming, and whether there was any reliable way to distinguish between the two from the outside. He thought about the composure of a man who has committed murder, and the composure of a man who has not committed murder, but who knows he appears
You
to
were
have done
manipulating
so,
me this
and
whole
has decided
time.
that the best response
Indeed.
to this appearance
The game
is a
is
kind of
over.
aggressive honesty. Both composures looked the same from
You
the
thought
outside.
you could hide this?
He thought about Dr.
I know
Helena
everything.
Marsh.
What is that? Where did
He
you
thought
get
about
it?
the letter in
The details
August,
don't
Sir
matter.
Edmund
You will do
dictating,
as I
reading
say,
back,
or this
signing
goes
with
public.
unusual care. A letter to a woman who had given 9 years, delivered at the moment when he had decided she was no longer required. He thought about what that letter would have said, and what it would have felt like
I must
to receive
appear
it,
innocent,
and what a person
unaware of any
Dr.
guilt.
Marsh's
My hands
capability
to
in
now,
particular
Poirot's gaze
psychology
misses
would have
nothing.
done with the feeling. He thought about her
Innocent.
answer.
I am innocent.
I was sad, and the precise
poison was in the
calibration of
cup.
it.
Who
The
poured
way
it?
it admitted feeling
I
while
don't know.
refusing to name feeling
you,
as
monsieur?
motive.
Your hand
The
was
way
on
it
the
was
pot.
simultaneously
It was not
exactly
I.
what an innocent person would say and exactly what a very intelligent guilty person would say. He thought about the cattleya. He thought about it for a long time. A dying plant separated from the others, not in anger, not dramatically, with care, with knowledge. By someone who understood what they were doing and had, in the act of doing it, said something that required the vocabulary of 9 years of intimacy to say. Richard Ashworth had not known what a cattleya removal meant. Dr. Helena Marsh had known immediately, precisely,
The
and
victim was
without
seated
apparent
here,
awareness that
unmoving.
knowing was significant.
He reached
But
for the
knowing
glass.
was not placing.
A moment of hesitation.
And placing, proving the placing,
Locked,
was not in his power,
as I
not
suspected.
yet. Not without the one thing he could
truth.
feel at the edges of his
Poirot has known
understanding
since
that
the
he was
second
missing.
day.
Not a new fact, he was increasingly certain it was not a new fact, something he had. Something already
Grief
in
is
the
a
archive
curious
of the
thing.
grey cells,
It exposes
filed
what
in
we
those
hide.
first hours of
What are you implying,
investigation when
Monsieur
everything
Poirot?
is observed
The one who
and
feigns
nothing
mourning
yet
the loudest
understood.
often has the
He
most
needed
to
to find
conceal.
it. He sat at the table until the winter light failed entirely, and the room went grey and then dark around him. And he did not light the lamp because the dark was, in its way, useful. It removed everything except the contents of his own mind, and left him alone with the two theories and the thing between them that he could not yet name. He needed one more thing. He did not yet know what it was,
You were
but it was
manipulating me
there.
this
He
whole
could feel
time.
it the way one feels a word at the very edge of
Indeed.
recall.
The
Present
game is
and
over.
specific and stubbornly, temporarily, silent.
You thought you could
Came
hide
at
this?
7 minutes past 4
I know
in the
everything.
morning.
What is
Not
that?
from a
Where
new
did you get
interview.
it? The
Not from
details
a
don't
fresh
matter. You will
examination
do
of the
as I
physical
say,
evidence.
or this goes public.
Not from any of the deliberate, methodical processes that Poirot had been applying to the problem with increasing urgency over the preceding 36 hours. It came, as the truly decisive things always
must
came,
appear innocent,
in his experience,
unaware of any
from the
guilt.
particular quality of stillness
My
that
hands stay
arrives
now.
in the
Poirot's
mind only
gaze
after
misses
it has
nothing.
exhausted every other approach and
Innocent.
finally,
I am innocent.
reluctantly, stops pushing.
The poison was in the
He
cup.
had been lying awake
poured
in the
it?
crooked room,
I
not
don't know.
attempting sleep, but
And
not
you, monsieur?
attempting thought either.
Your hand was on the
Simply
pot.
existing in the dark
It
with
was
the
not
case
I.
arranged around him like furniture, present and familiar, and no longer demanding immediate examination. When the grey cells, working in their own unhurried time below the surface of conscious effort, delivered it, not with drama, not with the sudden electric quality that lesser detective fiction attributed to moments of revelation, just a memory, arriving quietly, sitting down beside him in the dark, the study. The first morning, Dr. Helena Marsh in Sir Edmund's chair across the desk from him. The photographs on the
victim
mantelpiece
was
behind
seated here,
Poirot's head, Sir
unmoving.
Edmund at various stages of his life,
He reached
in
for the
various
glass.
places,
A
with
moment of
various people,
hesitation.
and Dr. Marsh not looking at
Locked,
them,
as
not
I
once.
suspected.
In 20 minutes of sitting
truth.
in the private study
Poirot
of a
has
man
known
she had
since
known
the
for
second
9
day.
years, he had noticed it then, had filed it with the precise, unattributed archival instinct of the grey
Grief is a
cells
curious
receiving
thing.
something they do
It
not yet
exposes
know
what we
what to do
hide.
with.
What are you implying,
He
Monsieur
had
Poirot?
noted,
The
as
one
though
who
looking
feigns
at
mourning
them
the
would cost
loudest
her
often has
something
the
she
most
could
to
not
conceal.
afford. He lay in the dark and held this observation up to the light of everything he now knew. A woman who had been a close friend, an intimate in the particular sense that resists definition but is recognized immediately, of Sir Edmund Ashworth for 9 years, who had sat with him in his grief, who had been present at the worst moments of his life and the best moments of his orchid cultivation and the long, ordinary middle of his daily existence, who had over 9 years accumulated the kind of knowledge of a person that is indistinguishable from love, whatever its precise categorization. Such a woman, sitting in his study surrounded by the accumulated visual evidence of his life, would not be able to help
Human
looking,
nature, mes
would look
amis, is a
perhaps
most
with
curious
grief,
thing.
with anger,
It compels one to act
with the
against one's own
complicated,
interests.
unresolvable feeling of a person
the
who
eyes,
is sitting
they
in the
reveal
space
what
of
the
someone
lips
they
will
have
not.
lost not to death
I sit
initially,
alone,
but to withdraw,
replaying it in my
to
mind.
the slow-managed removal
The silence of
Sir
the library echoes my
Edmund's
thoughts.
particular cruelty.
My hands
She might
betray
look
the
with
fear
pain.
I hide.
She might look with love. She might look with the terrible ambivalence of a person whose feelings for the dead man refused simple categorization. But she would look, unless Poirot went very still in the dark room.
Reginald Ashbury,
Unless
you are
the
under
photographs
arrest.
were not
No,
painful
this is
because
a
she missed
mistake.
it. Unless they were
Anti-Bite
painful
did
because
that.
she
Now,
was guilty.
deuce.
Because a person who has just done what Theory B required Dr. Marsh to have done, who has administered poison to a man whose photograph now looks back at her from a mantelpiece, cannot look at that photograph, not from grief, not from the complicated feelings of loss, but from something else entirely. from the specific physical inability of a person who has committed an irreversible act to meet,
Observe the
even in
hands,
two
so
dimensions,
tightly clasped,
even in
the
the
classic
frozen
sign of
moment of
fear,
a photograph,
hidden from the world.
the face of the person
This
they
person
have.
lived in terror of a secret being
Innocent
revealed.
grief looks at
It
photographs,
is written here,
guilty
plain
grief
as
looks
day.
away. Poirot sat up
Every
in bed.
detail of the murder
He had
replays in
been
my
looking
mind.
for 36 hours for
Tonight
a
we'll go
psychological
snub a
detail, a
chestnut to my
behavior, a
liking.
word choice, an emotional response that only made sense if theory B was
This letter
correct.
from Gerald Ashbury changes
He had
everything.
examined the cat liar
He
knowledge.
hid it inside the
He had
east wall
examined the
alcove.
word susceptible.
No one
He had
else must
examined he
know.
would never have done that to me with its specific damning tense. But those details could all be explained by theory A, by innocence, by 9 years of natural accumulation, by the ordinary language of a woman who had been secure in a friendship and had not imagined it would be taken from her. This detail could not. Because theory A, if theory A was correct, if Dr. Marsh was innocent and Richard Ashworth was guilty, gave Dr. Marsh every reason to look at the photographs. She had loved him, in her way. She had lost first to withdrawal and then to death. She was sitting in his study, in the
You were
intimate
manipulating me
space of
this
his
whole
private
time.
life, surrounded by evidence of who he
Indeed.
had been and what
The
he
game
had
is
meant.
over.
An innocent woman in that room with those
You
photographs
thought you
looked.
could hide this?
The
I know
inability to
everything.
look, the
What is
specific
that?
physical
Where did you get it?
avoidance, 20
The
minutes
details
without
don't
a
matter.
single
You will
glance
do
at
as
the
I say,
mantelpiece,
or
was
this
not the
goes
behavior
public.
of grief. It was the behavior of guilt. Ah, said Poirot. Just that, quietly to the dark room. But he felt, and it was not too strong a word, he decided, reviewing it in the moment it occurred.
I must appear
He felt
innocent,
the entire architecture
unaware
of the
of any
case
guilt.
shift. Not crumble,
My hands stay now.
shift.
Poirot's
As
gaze
a building
misses
shifts
nothing.
when its true foundation is finally
Innocent.
located
I
and
am
everything
innocent.
above it resettles into the
The
correct
poison was in the
alignment.
cup.
Theory B was
Who
not
poured it?
merely possible.
I don't know.
It was the only
you,
reading of
monsieur?
Dr. Helena Marsh's
hand was on the
behavior
pot.
in that room that made complete,
not I.
unforced, psychologically inevitable sense. And theory A, he worked through it now, with the clean, unsentimental efficiency of a man who has made his decision and is completing the necessary demolition. Theory A required Richard Ashworth to have entered the pavilion, prepared the glass, and administered the compound before 9 o'clock, which created the insoluble problem of the compounds. Deterioration, Sir Edmund's caution, and the probability that a man of his particular vigilance would not drink unexamined from a glass
The victim
prepared
was
an
seated here,
indeterminate time in
unmoving.
advance by an unknown hand.
He reached for the glass.
Theory
moment
A
of
required the
hesitation.
cufflink to have been lost during
Locked,
an act of
As
preparation.
I suspected.
But the cufflink was found near the heating
truth.
pipe, away from the
Poirot
preparation
has known
area,
since the
in a
second
position
day.
consistent with loss, during an earlier visit or a peripheral approach on the evening of the murder.
Grief is a
Theory
curious
A
thing.
required Oliver
It
Fane's
exposes what
sighting
we
to be
hide.
the sighting of a
What are you
guilty
implying,
man
Monsieur
approaching
Poirot?
his crime.
The
But
one who
Richard had
feigns
heard
mourning the
voices.
loudest often has the most to
Plural,
conceal.
possibly, or a single voice speaking with the particular animated quality of someone in conversation. At 9:20, when, if theory A was correct, Sir Edmund should have been alone. He was not alone at 9:20, Dr. Marsh had been there. Theory A required the Catleya removal to be an act of unconscious symbolism by a man who had, in the same breath, admitted complete ignorance of the Catleya's significance
You were
in
manipulating
orchid
me this whole
cultivation.
time.
A man cannot perform an
Indeed.
act of unconscious
The game is
symbolism in a
over.
vocabulary he does not possess. Theory A,
You thought you could
Poirot
hide
saw
this?
now with perfect,
I know
unobstructed
everything.
clarity,
What is that? Where
had
did you
been
get
built on
it?
one
The
false
details don't
foundation.
matter.
The
You will
assumption
do
that
as
the
I
person
say,
who had prepared
or
the
this goes
second glass
public.
had done so before Sir Edmund entered the pavilion. Remove that assumption. Follow instead the evidence of the deterioration problem, of Richard's peripheral approach, of the voices, and theory A
I
did
must
not
appear
merely
innocent,
weaken.
unaware
It
of any
became
guilt.
impossible. The glass
My
had been
hands stay now.
prepared after
Poirot's
9
gaze
o'clock.
misses
Richard
nothing.
had not entered the pavilion.
Innocent.
The
I am
person who
innocent.
had been inside at 9:20,
The poison was
when
in the
Richard,
cup.
standing in the cold
poured it?
outside, had
I-
heard the sounds
I
of
don't know.
conversation,
And
was
you,
Dr.
monsieur?
Helena Marsh.
Your hand was on the pot.
And the photograph detail,
It was not I.
the 20 minutes in the study, the eyes that had moved everywhere except the mantelpiece, was the small, silent, undeniable confirmation that she had known, when she sat across from Poirot in that room, exactly what she had done to the man whose face looked down from the shelf above Poirot's head. She had not been unable to look at those photographs because she was grieving. She had been unable to look at them because she was present. He lit the lamp, reached for his notes, wrote on the page headed Theory B, beneath all the careful architecture
victim
of the
was seated
constructed
here,
argument.
unmoving.
She did not look at the photographs.
He reached for
20
the
minutes
glass,
in his study,
a moment of
not
hesitation.
once. An innocent
Locked,
woman looks.
as
A
I
guilty woman
suspected.
cannot. This is the thing that
The
Theory
truth.
A cannot explain.
Poirot
This
has
is the
known
thing that
since the
makes
second
Theory B
day.
not merely possible but necessary. He set down the pen. He thought about what came next. The gathering,
Grief
the
is a curious
presentation,
thing.
the formal
exposes
moment of
what we
revelation
hide.
that his
What are you
profession
implying,
required
Monsieur
and
Poirot?
that justice
The
demanded.
one who feigns mourning the
He
loudest
thought
often
about
has the
Richard
most to
Ashworth,
conceal.
who had spent 36 hours in the particular purgatory of a man who knows the evidence points at him and can do nothing about it but tell the truth and hope. He thought about what it meant to have been innocent in a situation that wore guilt's clothing, and what it would mean to be publicly exonerated by the same process that had, equally publicly. He thought about Dr. Helena Marsh. He thought about 9 years, and a letter in August, and a white cattleya laid on a bench with the tenderness of a person performing the last rite of something that had been, in its complicated way, a form of love. He thought about what it cost to be certain of something like this. What it cost to take the step
Human
from I
nature,
believe
mes
this is
amis,
true
is a
to
most
I will
curious
act as
thing.
though it is true
It
in
compels
front of
one to act
witnesses,
against one's
with
own
consequences
interests.
that cannot be retracted.
And the eyes, they
He
reveal
had
what
been
the lips will
uncertain for
not.
36 hours. He was no longer
I sit
uncertain.
alone, replaying it in my
Grey
mind.
cells, having found their
The
answer,
silence
were
of
very
the library
quiet.
echoes
The
my
particular
thoughts.
quiet of a completed mechanism,
My hands
all
betray
parts
the
in
fear
place,
I hide.
the work done. He was not satisfied. He was something more complicated than satisfied, and something less comfortable. He dressed with his customary precision every detail attended to. The moustaches, the coat,
Reginald
the shoes.
Ashbury, you are under
The
arrest.
ritual of
No,
appearance
this
and
is a
preparation,
mistake.
the
I can't
external
bite
order
it
that
up.
made
Now,
the internal
deuce.
order possible. Then he went to the telephone in the inn's hallway, and he called Ashworth Park, and he asked Reeves, who answered on the third ring with the composure of a man for whom 3 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon required identical professionalism, to inform the household that Monsieur Poirot would be calling at 10 o'clock, and that he would be grateful if all members
Observe the
of
hands, so
the
tightly
household
clasped,
would make
the
themselves
classic sign
available.
of fear,
He had,
hidden
he
from
said,
the world.
something he wished to
This
present
person
to
lived
them.
in terror of a
2
secret being
things, in
revealed.
fact.
It is
He would
written here,
explain when
plain
he
as day.
arrived. The morning
Every
room
detail
at
of the
Ashworth
murder
Park had been
replays in my
arranged
mind.
at Poirot's specific
Tonight, reversing
request,
our blood
with
assessment
chairs
of my
sufficient
liking.
for all. Not in the casual scatter of ordinary occupation, but in the
This
deliberate
letter from Gerald
configuration
Ashbury changes
of an
everything.
audience.
He
7
hid it
chairs in a
inside the
slight
east
curve,
wall alcove.
facing the fireplace
No
before
one else
which
must
Poirot
know.
proposed to stand. This arrangement, he had explained to Reeves without explaining why, was important. Reeves had produced the configuration without comment, with the quiet competence of a man who has learned that the requests of investigators, like the requests of surgeons, are best executed without editorial commentary. They assembled at 10 o'clock precisely. Lady Cecily Ashworth, pale and composed in black, occupying the chair nearest the window with the slightly bewildered dignity of a woman who has not yet decided whether she is a widow or a participant in a drama.
You were
Oliver
manipulating
Fane
me
beside
this
her,
whole
his
time.
London confidence somewhat diminished
Indeed.
by 36 hours
The
of
game is
Ashworth
over.
Park in winter, with murder on the premises and a detective
You
in
thought
the
you could
village,
hide
Mrs.
this? I know
Dorothy
everything.
Peel at the
What
end
is
of the
that?
row,
Where did you get
upright,
it?
hands
The
folded.
details don't matter.
Her
You
11
will do
years
as
of
I
professional
say,
discretion
or this goes
arranged around
public.
her like armor. Reeves standing near the door, not seated, he had declined a chair, preferring the position of a man responsible for the room's order rather than merely its occupancy.
must
Inspector
appear
Morley
innocent,
near the window, arms
unaware of
folded,
any guilt.
with the expression of a man
My
who has
hands
been
thin
told
now,
something
Poirot's gaze
surprising
misses
this
nothing.
morning and has not yet finished being
Innocent.
surprised
I am
by
innocent.
it. Poirot had telephoned
The poison was in the cup.
him at 7,
Who poured
and
it?
the conversation had
I
been,
don't
by
know.
Morley's account to
And
his
you,
sergeant
monsieur?
afterward,
Your hand
among
was
the
on the
more
pot.
unusual of his professional
It was not I.
experience. Hastings in the corner, notebook open, pen ready, his expression that of a man who has been told to expect the unexpected and is finding in practice that this instruction is harder to follow than it sounds. And at opposite ends of the curved arrangement, whether by accident or by the subtle choreography of people who do not wish to be near each other, Richard Ashworth and Dr. Helena Marsh. Richard sat with his hands on his knees, his grey eyes steady, his composure the composure of a man who has been waiting for this and has
The victim was
decided that
seated
whatever
here,
it brings,
unmoving.
the waiting is worse.
He reached for the glass.
He looked at
A
Poirot
moment
when
of
Poirot
hesitation.
entered, and his look said, "Now then,
Locked,
whatever it is
as
now."
I suspected.
Marsh sat with her medical
truth.
bag on the floor beside
Poirot
her chair.
has known since the
She had
second
brought
day.
it out of habit, or out of the habit of habit, the automatic professional equipment of a physician who goes nowhere
Grief is a
without
curious
the
thing.
means to be useful.
It exposes what
She
we
looked
hide.
at Poirot
What
with
are you
the
implying,
frank,
Monsieur
composed
Poirot?
readiness that had
The one who feigns
characterized
mourning
every
the loudest
interaction
often
he
has
had
the
had
most
with
to
her.
conceal.
Her hands were still. Her breathing was measured. She looked, as she always looked, like a woman with nothing to conceal. Poirot stood before the fireplace. He took a moment, not for theatrical effect or not only, to look at each face in turn. Reading, calibrating. confirming what he already knew about who was in this room and why. Then he said, "I thank you all for your patience. What I am about to do is
You were
unusual.
manipulating me this whole
I
time.
ask your indulgence." He paused.
Indeed.
"I have two theories,"
game
he
is
said,
over.
"about the death of Sir Edmund Ashworth. I will present both.
You thought you could hide
I do
this?
this not because I am
I
uncertain."
know everything.
He caught
What is
himself
that? Where did
because
you get it?
honesty was,
The
in the
details
end,
don't
more
matter.
useful
You will
than
do
performance.
as I say,
Or rather,
or this
I do
goes
this
public.
not because I am now uncertain, though I will confess to you that I have been for 36 hours in a state of uncertainty that was deeply uncomfortable for a man of my habits. I do this because
I
the
must appear
presentation of
innocent,
both theories in
unaware
this
of any
room to
guilt.
this company will demonstrate
hands say now,
something that I
Poirot's
cannot
gaze misses
demonstrate
nothing.
any other way. He looked at them
Innocent.
all.
I am innocent.
I ask only that you watch
the
carefully,
poison
not
was
me.
in the cup.
Each
Who
other.
poured it?
Theory
I-
A, said Poirot,
don't know.
is the theory that
And you,
the
monsieur?
evidence, in
Your
its
hand
most
was on the
direct
pot.
and uncomplicated reading,
was not I.
produces. He presented it without notes, from the structure he had built in this same room 2 days ago for Hastings, but expanded now, formalized, delivered with the even, thorough clarity of a man laying out an argument he has examined from every angle. The motive, the will revision, the 4-day window, the compounding debts, the method, the pavilion during the dinner hour, the prepared glass, the knowledge of Sir Edmund's routine. The evidence, the cufflink, Oliver Fane's sighting, the inability to account for the missing 30 minutes.
The victim was
The
seated
psychological truth,
unmoving.
a man who has been told
He
his
reached for
entire
the
life
glass.
that he is
A moment of
insufficient,
hesitation.
delivered a final verdict of
Locked,
that insufficiency
as
in
I
the form of a
suspected.
solicitor's appointment,
The
acting
truth.
from the
Poirot has
combined
known
pressure
since the
of
second
financial
day.
ruin and something older and more corrosive. The particular rage of a person who has waited too long to be found
Grief
adequate
is a
and
curious
has finally
thing.
stopped
It
waiting.
exposes what we
He
hide.
presented it
What are you
completely.
implying, Monsieur
He
Poirot?
presented it convincingly.
The one who feigns mourning
He
the
presented
loudest
it as
often
he
has the
presented
most to
it to
conceal.
Hastings as if it were the solution, and he watched. Richard Ashworth, hearing himself named and constructed as a murderer with full logical apparatus, did something unexpected. He did not protest. He did not interrupt. He listened to the entire presentation with an attention that was, if anything, too careful. The attention of a man tracking an argument he recognizes, point by point, as the argument the world has been making about him since the morning of the discovery, and who has the particular exhausted dignity of someone who has decided to hear it out rather than fight it. When Poirot finished, Richard said, "That's what it looks like. I know that's what it looks like. Not, that's wrong. Not, I didn't do it. Just,
Human
I know."
nature, mes amis,
The
is
knowledge
a
of
most
a
curious
man
thing.
who has been living inside other
compels one to
people's
act against
suspicion
one's
for
own
36
interests.
hours and has come to
And
understand
the
its
eyes,
shape
they
precisely.
reveal what the lips will
Poirot
not.
noted this,
I
filed
sit
it.
alone, replaying it in
Marsh,
my
during
mind.
the presentation of Theory
silence
A,
of the library
had listened
echoes
with the
my
same
thoughts.
composed attention she brought
My
to
hands
everything.
betray the fear I hide.
But there was something, not in her expression, which remained professionally controlled, but in the quality of her stillness. She was too still. The stillness of a person not reacting, rather than the stillness of a
Reginald
person who has
Ashbury,
nothing
you are
to
under
react.
arrest. No!
When
This is a
Poirot
mistake!
concluded, she looked at
Anti
Richard
budget
Ashworth
duck. Now,
briefly,
deuce!
a glance of perhaps 2 seconds sideways, quickly withdrawn. And in those 2 seconds, something crossed her face that was not sympathy and not guilt, and not quite either, but which belonged to the family of expressions worn by people watching something they have caused unfold in front of them. Poirot saw it. He said nothing. "And yet," said Poirot, turning once at the fireplace with his hands clasped
Observe
behind
the
his back,
hands, so
"there is
tightly
another
clasped,
possibility."
the classic
The room
sign of
shifted.
fear, hidden
Not
from the world.
dramatically, no gasps,
This person
no
lived in
sudden
terror of a
movements,
secret being revealed.
but
It
a
is written
collective
here,
adjustment,
plain as day.
the almost physical sensation
Every
of an
detail of
audience
the
that
murder
has settled
replays in
into
my
one
mind.
understanding being asked
To
to
not
unsettle
reverse
itself.
no assessment
Lady
of my mind.
Cecily's hands tightened slightly in her lap. Oliver Fane's eyes
This letter
moved
from Gerald
quickly to
Ashbury
Dr.
changes
Marsh and then
everything.
away. Hastings
He
looked
hid it
up from his
inside the
notebook
east
with
wall
an
alcove.
expression of pure,
No one else
undisguised
must know.
astonishment. Morley, who had been told this morning, remained very still. "The same evidence," said Poirot. "Read differently. He presented Theory B. He did it with the same thoroughness, the same even clarity. The motive, not financial ruin over 4 days, but something slower and in some respects more devastating. 9 years of invested devotion, a letter in August, the managed withdrawal of a man who decided that what Dr. Marsh represented in his life was, like an orchid past its season, no longer required. The method, not preparation during the dinner hour, but a visit after 9 o'clock.
You were
Welcomed
manipulating me this whole
unsuspected.
time.
The second glass prepared not in
Indeed.
advance, but in the moment.
game is over.
By hands that knew exactly where. Everything was
You thought
in
you
whose
could hide
steadiness
this?
Sir Edmund Ashworth
I know
placed
everything.
absolute
What is
trust.
that? Where did you get it?
The evidence
The details don't
reread,
matter. You
the
will do
cufflink
as I
consistent
say,
with loss
or
during
this goes
peripheral
public.
approach, not active crime. Oliver Fane's sighting placing Richard outside at 9:20, arriving after the act, not before. The absence of compound deterioration because the glass was freshly
I
prepared.
must appear innocent,
The cat-liar removal
unaware
as
of any
deliberate,
guilt.
knowing act by a
My
woman
hands
who had
stay now.
spent
Poirot's
9 years
gaze
learning the
misses nothing.
vocabulary of this
Innocent.
pavilion,
I am
and the
innocent.
detail he had saved for last.
poison
the
was in the
detail he
cup.
had found at 7
Who
minutes
poured it?
past 4 in the morning in a
I don't
dark
know.
room.
And
In my
you,
first
monsieur?
interview with Dr.
Your hand was on the pot.
Marsh, said Poirot quietly.
It was not I.
I sat in Sir Edmund's chair, in Sir Edmund's study, with Sir Edmund's photographs arranged on the mantelpiece behind my head. I spoke with Dr. Marsh for 20 minutes. She is a woman who knew this man for 9 years, who had been present at his grief and his dailiness and his private difficulties. She had been in that study many times. Those photographs were familiar to her. He paused. She did not look at them once. The room was very quiet. An innocent woman, a woman who has lost a friend, a patient, a person central to her life for 9 years, cannot
The victim
help
was
but look,
seated here,
with grief,
unmoving.
with memory,
He reached
with
for
the
the glass.
complicated feeling of a
moment of
person in the
hesitation.
presence of someone recently
Locked,
gone.
as I
She
suspected.
looks because not looking requires an
The
effort
truth.
that innocent grief does
Poirot
not
has
make.
known since
He
the
turned
second
and
day.
looked directly at Dr. Helena Marsh. She did not look because she could not from grief. From guilt,
Grief is a
from the
curious
specific
thing.
physical
It
impossibility
exposes
of
what we
meeting,
hide.
even in a
What are you
photograph,
implying,
even
Monsieur
across
Poirot?
a room. The face
one
of
who
a
feigns
person one
mourning
has
the
killed.
loudest often
the
has the
silence
most to
lasted 4
conceal.
seconds. Then several things happened nearly simultaneously. Lady Cecily made a small sound, not quite a word, not quite a cry, and pressed her hand to her mouth. Oliver Fane went very white and looked at his sister. Hastings's pen had stopped moving entirely, suspended above the notebook in the arrested gesture of a man whose hand has forgotten what it was doing. Richard Ashworth looked at Dr. Marsh.
You were manipulating
and
me
Doc-
this whole time.
Helena Marsh. She did not cry
Indeed.
out. She did not
The
protest.
game is over.
She did not perform the indignation of the falsely accused or the
You
collapse
thought you could
of the
hide this?
genuinely caught.
I know everything.
She sat
What
very
is
still
that?
for a
Where did you
moment
get
with
it?
the quality
The details
of
don't
stillness
matter.
that
You will
Poirot now
do as I say,
recognized as her
or this
specific
goes
register.
public.
The stillness that was not calm but the performance of calm, the muscular effort of a contained person containing. Then she looked at Poirot. And what was in her eyes in that moment was not
I must
fear,
appear
and
innocent,
not anger, and not the
unaware of any
desperate
guilt.
calculation of a person searching
My hands
for a
stay now.
remaining
Poirot's
exit.
gaze misses nothing.
It was, and Poirot had not expected
Innocent.
this,
I am
and
innocent.
found that it moved him in a way he
The
had not
poison was in the
anticipated
cup.
being moved
Who poured
recognition.
it?
The
I
look
don't
of a
know.
person who was known,
And you, monsieur?
somewhere below
Your
the
hand was
level
on
of
the pot.
conscious acknowledgement
It was
that
not
this
I.
moment was coming. Who has been waiting for it with the same quality of exhausted resignation that Richard Ashworth had brought to the hearing of Theory A. She had known he would find it. She had not known which detail would be the one. But she had known from the moment he sat in Sir Edmund's chair and began to ask his careful questions, that he was the kind of man who would find it eventually. The photographs, she said. Her voice was steady, quiet, entirely her own. I knew I hadn't looked at them. I knew it at the time, I thought.
The victim
She
was
stopped.
seated here,
I
unmoving.
thought it hadn't been noticed.
He
Everything,
reached for the glass.
said Poirot
A
gently,
moment of
is
hesitation.
noticed. She looked at him for another
Locked,
moment.
as I suspected.
Then she looked down at her hands.
The truth.
The hands that had,
Poirot
in the
has
warm
known
green
since the
space of
second
the
day.
Greenhouse Pavilion, poured a second glass and handed it across with the steadiness of a person who has made an
Grief is a
irreversible
curious
decision
thing.
and has decided
It
to make it
exposes what we
completely.
hide.
She
What
said
are you
nothing
implying,
further.
Monsieur Poirot?
Poirot looked at
The
Richard
one who
Ashworth.
feigns mourning the
Richard was
loudest often
staring
has
at
the
Doctor
most to conceal.
Marsh with an expression that contained, in layered complexity, shock and relief, and something that was not quite pity but occupied adjacent territory. The expression of a man who has been in a burning room and has just been told the door is open, who cannot yet feel the relief fully because the room is still burning around him. Monsieur Ashworth, said Poirot. You went to the pavilion that evening. You heard voices. You turned back. Yes, said Richard, very quietly. You heard your uncle's voice, and one other. Richard closed his eyes briefly. I didn't know whose. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was going in circles. He opened his eyes. I should have gone in. No, said Poirot.
Human nature,
It would not have
is a
changed
most
what had
curious
already
thing.
been given.
It
The
compels
glass
one to
was
act
already
against
in his
one's own
hand.
interests.
He paused. You could
And
not
the
have
eyes,
saved
they
him.
reveal what the lips
But you
will
have
not.
now, by hearing what you honestly.
I sit alone,
helped to find
replaying
who
it in
did.
my mind.
Inspector Morley
The
moved
silence of the
quietly
library
toward
echoes
Dr.
my
Helena
thoughts.
Marsh. She did not
My
resist.
hands betray the fear
She
I
picked up
hide.
her medical bag, the automatic gesture, the professional reflex, and then seemed to recognize the absurdity of it and set it down again. She stood. She looked once at the window, at the grounds of Ashworth
Reginald
Park in
Ashbury,
their
you are
winter
under
stillness,
arrest.
The
No,
Greenhouse
this is a
Pavilion
mistake.
visible in the middle
And
distance,
anti-budget
glass and
now,
iron
deuce.
in the pale morning light. She did not look at the photographs on the wall of the morning room, the photographs of Sir Edmund that Lady Cecily had arranged there 2 days ago in the first hours of grief. Poirot noticed. He looked away.